Okay, hello everybody. We should be up and running. Welcome to the first ever Unlearning Economics research stream. So I'd planned to do a few of these, and I thought I'd get started with something which has become a huge issue. I mean, arguably it's been an issue for decades. People have been talking about the cost of living and the cost of living crisis. Hello, Ruben. Well, uh, I've said plenty. Yeah. So anyway, the people have been talking about the cost of living crisis for decades, but it's become a much bigger issue post-pandemic, and there's a lot of different things which are potentially contributing to it. So there are lots of things which are potentially contributing to it, and I want to try and shine some light on what's driving it, like what are the main costs. So let's just make a little document here. And hello everybody, thanks for tuning in. Cost of living search stream. Oops. So I think there's two main sub questions as far as I can see it. One is, what is driving the increase in the cost of living? Like, is it like housing, energy, food, durables like fridges, cars, fridges, financial products, basically like interest rates, because we know that they're going to start going up, but what about people's actual costs that they're facing? This is a lecture. Hello everybody. There's no Elden Ring today. But no, this is we can't just play Elden Ring all the time, can we? As much as we want to, we can't just play Elden Ring all the time. We have to so what, let's say what goods and services, terrible time. Which goods and services are driving the increase in the cost of living? And another thing is, what is responsible for the rise in costs? Yeah, I'm going to submit this to a journal afterwards, everybody. Probably at like one of the bigger journals, like the Quarterly Journal of Economics. Screen too small for phone use. Okay, I just maximize that and I'll do what I can do. I didn't actually realize people were tuning in on their phones, so thank you for telling me that, Vandana, because that's actually really helpful. So what is responsible for the rising costs? So you've got a lot of people talk about like monopoly power / big business, and then there's issues like higher demand, supply chain constraints, and these things profiteering. Well, profiteering's kind of in monopoly power / big business, and this is actually, I would say, this is what triggered me wanting to do the stream, because I read an article which we're going to read again in a second. It's just a short article in the Guardian, and let me just readjust my mic. There we go. In the Guardian, and it seem to blame big businesses for increasing prices. Now, these different factors can be, you'll all get credited. We'll all be co-authors, all 197 of us. So 198, including me. So there's monopoly power and big business. There's higher demand. Perhaps demand that was constrained during the pandemic, but which has gone up. And then there's these supply supply chain constraints that we all know about, right? So issues with procuring things like microchips, for example, from global supply chains, which have obviously been massively affected by the pandemic, and there's also the war in Ukraine, Russia. Now, I don't know that this is much of a factor right now. I feel like it probably will be as the war goes on. And I mean, I know that the actual amount that we've reduced our oil and especially gas and other energy imports from Russia is actually pretty small. So I don't know to what extent. Certainly, I don't think that's contributing in terms of like the headline figures that we see, because they haven't filtered through yet, right? The war is relatively recent, and it will affect things with a lag. But I don't really know. I mean, I can say that all of these things are responsible for the rising costs. I think I would say, mostly energy. I don't know. I'm not going to put a key on. I was thinking of a key, but that's just too complicated. But I would say mostly energy, perhaps housing, and perhaps food are contributing towards this. But this is what we want to find out in this stream. Yeah, and there's food. Yeah, food will be affected as well by the war. So, yeah, I mean, there's other things like Brexit. Look, you can't make an exhaustive list of things that are driving an increase in the cost of living, right? There's going to be so many different things, but I want to try out talking a little bit about this and reading through some stuff and see how convincing we actually find it. So let me get this article up to start. Everybody's already saying some interesting things in the chat. It's not, in fact, one. Okay, so Ukrainian crops. Okay, you can't disrupt 1/4 of the world's wheat and expect no issues re-Ukraine. Ukrainian crops were planted last year, and current issues won't affect prices until next year. Oil consumption from Russia was tiny. It's not, in fact, 1/4 of the world's wheat. It's 1/4 of the world's wheat exports, which is about 3% of actual global what, which I suppose is supposed to mean wheat. Yeah, people say expansion in the money supply. I'm not really too much of a monetarist, but we can put that there because that is a popular explanation. So, let me just find this article for you. So I'm just finding it on my other screen, and then I'll bring it up for all of you, and we can have a little look at what the bloody hell is going on. If I can actually find the article. Oh, here we are. Excellent. Christine Berry. Lend us a hand in 2022. No, I will not. Right. So. Okay, so that seems... I'm going to zoom out slightly. Just so... I think the chat's going to clash a little bit with the... with the article, but that's okay. I'll make it slightly smaller. Actually, no, it's not gonna. No, let's just leave it. Hey, you're amazing and your work is excellent. Thank you very much. That's really kind. Link to article in chat. Oh, now here's very interesting. This is 1 second. Let me just minimize this article for a second. So I'm going to read it out so we can all go at the same pace. Otherwise, that would just be a bit silly. Now, I've banned links in my chat, which is really annoying for things like this. Has that gone through? Am I allowed to send links? Side note, you should consider voice acting. I'll think about it. I'd like to do like the Play-Doh, the clay ones. No, what are they made out of? You know, Wallace and Gromit and like Chicken Run, the stuff that Nick Park does. Plasticine? I don't know what they're made out of. Anyway, the stop motion stuff, I'd like to do that. Oh, there's the article. Okay, so I'm allowed to send links. Excellent. I'm allowed to send links. You see, I still don't know anything. Right. Cool. So let's go through this. This Guardian article is a relatively short read. Claymation, stop motion claim. They call it claymation. That's not a nice portmanteau, is it? I mean, most portmanteaus are pretty terrible. All right, we're getting distracted. Wallace and Gromit, next stream. Okay, Christine Berry in The Guardian. The UK's cost of living crisis seems to escalate almost by the day. According to experts, we are facing the biggest fall in living standards since the 1970s. Announcing a phase-out of Russian oil imports, Boris Johnson spoke of dark days ahead, as if the days we live in were not already dark enough. This crisis cannot be blamed solely on Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. The return of high inflation may be traceable to short-term supply shocks, but the things that turn it into a crisis have been decades in the making. Okay, so she's already, if we just quickly switch back to these, she's already saying, okay, these two might be responsible to some extent, but they're filtered through this monopoly power, big business set of institutions or economic or economy that we have, right? And so therefore maybe we should be looking at them. All right. Your voice is like 30% of the reason I decided to subscribe. That's nice to... you know what? I can't tell. I'm not sure if that's like nice to hear or if it's not nice to hear. But thank you anyway. So, in the 1970s, stagflation, low growth coupled with high inflation, put an end to 3 decades of rising living standards. Now, it comes on top of a lost decade. Real wages are no higher than in 2008. Is this just gonna... Okay, we might look at that article in a second. When the financial crisis hit. I do think... So this is UK based, just to remind everybody. I do think that that is true. That real wages, like, since median real wages, I think, and real wages at like the bottom, in the bottom half of the income distribution, were very stagnant for about 10 years after the financial crisis. Millions of households were already struggling to make ends meet, yes. It does not take much to tip them into the red. Yeah, very true. So a lot of people, even before the financial crisis, even during the housing boom, were struggling to some extent. And so, you know, if you've got bills and debts and other obligations, then you might be balanced, your budget might be balanced on a knife edge. It is not just that wages have been squeezed. Simply existing in the UK has become inordinately expensive. This is partly because we have gone further than almost anywhere else in turning essential goods and services into financial assets. Because people literally cannot do without them, owning these assets is a reliable way to extract huge rents while doing very little. By putting the means of a decent life in the hands of private gatekeepers whose only concern is to maximise their rents, we have built an economy that systematically inflates costs for consumers while also driving down wages. Okay, I was about to say, it sounds like she's talking about housing. Here we go. The most obvious and egregious example is housing. When soaring housing costs are taken into account, living standards have been falling for most working-age households since 2002. House prices have risen 20% since the start of the pandemic and are at a record high, both in absolute terms and relative to earnings. This leaves growing numbers of people trapped in the private rented sector, where about a third of their income is gobbled up by rent alone. Average rents have risen 8.6% in the past year and now stand at over £1,000 a month. This comes on top of a decade where rents already rose far faster than wages. Of course, renters' losses are landlords' gains. Attracted by these outsized returns, buy-to-let investors have swallowed up a substantial chunk of available homes in recent years. Okay. So it seems that, yeah. So I'm not 100% sure of like what type of rent she means there, because average rents, that's not going to be individual rents. It's not going to average over £1,000 a month across the country. Like, I live in London in what I would class as not inexpensive house, and my individual rent is not £1,000 a month, and so that must be overall rent, like household rent. It's still very high. Nobody's saying it's not high. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what measures she's using. Okay, so rents have risen very high, and a lot of the wage increases we have seen, the minimal wage increases we have seen, have been offset, perhaps even entirely, perhaps even to the extent that living costs have gone up because of these rising rents. So rents haven't kept up with incomes, essentially. Or you could say that rents have outpaced growth in incomes because they've risen by so much. Where do I live? London. Catching COVID twice within 3 weeks. That's scary. Yeah, I'm sorry that you caught COVID 3 times. What? How's that even possible? Surely, I mean, sympathy extended, but surely COVID lasts for like a week, right? So 3 times in 2 weeks. I don't know. Okay, let's continue with this article, because this is our starting point. I want to know, can we attribute a sizable proportion of the increase in the cost of living to things like monopoly power? We see the same patterns elsewhere, from care to water, energy to transport. Okay, so housing and utilities. Britain's childcare system is the 3rd most expensive in the world. Bad news for parents, but good news for the private equity investors buying up nurseries. Meanwhile, about £1 in every £10 spent on social care is extracted from the system by highly financialised companies that own and control assets within it, contributing to an eye-watering 30% increase in costs for self-funded care since 2012. Rail fares have risen 20% in real terms since privatisation, and water bills 40%, with excess profits inflating the latter by an estimated £2.3 billion a year. Meanwhile, as the think tank Commonwealth points out, the monopoly owners of the grid are achieving 40% profit margins and pay out over £1 billion a year to shareholders. All right, so this is what I'm interested in. These types of claims. So the reason I might be skeptical of this, okay, of the claim that it's not of the claim that the current economic system with its poorly managed monopolies, the way that the UK poorly manages utilities and housing and everything, not that is first monopolistic and second somehow responsible for, you know, rising prices and low quality, right? I'm not skeptical of that. Yeah, I should put something in the margins, Mikhail, definitely. But yeah. Oh, fair, gotta go. There was a bit of spam from Fair. I don't know if any of my Twitch mods are on, but if you are, try to ban them. So yeah. So the reason I'm skeptical of this, right, is that in my experience, and this is where I need to read this stuff. In my experience, it's not always the case that the people who own the monopolies, the managers and bosses, as well as the shareholders, the executives, the high ups, it's not always the case that they're actually making a lot of money when you place that money in the context of the whole system, right? So if any of you have watched my trains video, I referenced a report called The Great Train Robbery, and we might look at it later, but basically what they found was, yeah, look, since the trains have been privatized, the shareholders and the bosses are kind of ripping people off, and they're making a lot of money for themselves, for an individual, like millions, plenty for themselves. But when you place that against like the amount of the audio quality is gorgeous, Hobby. You're absolutely right. Um, when you place that against the amount of money that would be needed, for example, to reduce prices across the board, it's not very much, right? So it's not as clear as like they're taking all the money out of the system and therefore that's what's responsible, right? It's not like they're just being greedy. They are being greedy, but it's not like their greed can be responsible for the higher prices, because even if they're making loads of money for an individual, you're talking millions versus billions for, you know, how much goes through the system, how much would be required to reduce prices for everybody, to reinvest, to improve the quality. So that's not to excuse the current system or them. You know, they should be reined in, but reining them in wouldn't be enough. It's more of a systemic issue, right? It's more of a systemic issue because what you have is a rail system that is it's just badly designed, right? And you don't get enough long-term investment, and that filters through in higher prices, and you don't get it managed as well as it could be, and that filters through higher prices. So the terrible system is responsible both for the extraction of wealth and also for the for the fact that it's a terrible system, for the high prices, for the low quality. So do you see what I mean? I sometimes get concerned with people on the left when they, and this is something that a lot of people do, I think, in, you know, I don't know, members of the public do, when they're thinking about, you know, why we're being ripped off, that it'll be a narrative where the bosses, executives are just taking it all, and therefore there's nothing left for the rest of us. Definitely happens sometimes, but I tend to think that it's broader and more systemic, even if, you know, the bosses are taking plenty of money for themselves. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, but that is what I want to investigate, right? Like, I'm happy, I don't want to say happy, but I will be convinced either way. I want to know, you know, to what extent is like the simple monopoly power and corporate greed explanation enough to explain the cost of living crisis? Is it? Or is it simply that we have a terrible system? Okay. Right. The Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, recently warned against the threat of inflation caused by increasing wages. The bogeyman lurking behind the governor's intervention was the wage price spiral, whereby rising wages drive prices up further, leaving nobody better off. This plays into the idea, beloved by mainstream economists, that the interests of workers and consumers are essentially a seesaw. For one to gain, the other must lose. But this conveniently ignores the third actor in the equation, the owners. In the UK today, owners are the one group who actually have the power to set both wages and prices. Indeed, they have been systematically handed that power by decades of deregulation and trade union decline. So why did Bailey ignore them? Why, the FT commentator Martin Sandbu pondered, did he not call on powerful businesses to moderate their profits, rather than asking less powerful workers to moderate their wage demands? Perhaps, as Sandbu observes, because mainstream economics has a blind spot for the power of capital, and correcting this would mean asking uncomfortable questions about who bears the cost of rising inflation and who benefits. Okay, so I do agree with this statement. Certainly, if you're going to moralize inflation and say workers need to moderate their wage demands, then you should at least equally be asking, should companies moderate their price increases, right? It's only consistent for you to do that. Now, again, I tend to lean towards a systemic explanation more, rather than pointing fingers. But I completely understand this stance. People always blame workers and they don't look at capital. Could a rise in wage theft be a factor? I don't know how well wage theft is measured in the official statistics. I mean, as some individuals probably experience wage theft, but and they would then perceive their cost of living going up correctly, but I think the statistics would miss that. But that would have to be quite the rise in wage theft, right? I don't know if that. It seems that it's broader than that to me. Okay. High energy costs may have millions wondering how they will heat their homes, but BP's chief executive boasted unashamedly that they turn his company into a cash machine. BP's and Shell's profits soared to a combined $32 billion last year, with BP shareholders standing to benefit from a $1.5 billion share buyback. Demands for a windfall tax have proved popular because people intuitively understand that these enormous rewards are unearned and unfair. Okay, so just to hammer this point home, right? Again, agree the rewards may be unearned and unfair, right? But in terms of, I mean, BP and Shell are huge multinationals, right? And £32 billion is $32 billion is a lot of money, but can we place that against the context of like their revenues and their cost structures? You know what I mean? Like, is there the extraction of the money directly responsible for like rising prices? How much, suppose that we reduce their profits to zero, how much would prices go down? That's what I want to know. It might be a lot or it might not be. I'm not sure, but there's not enough context here. You know, it's like when people present nominal money values for things, and you know, this is what right wingers do with like government debt. They're like, the US government debt is trillions and trillions of dollars. It's like, well, okay, but what's the context of that? What are interest payments? What's national income? Right. And then I think you get something similar where lefties are kind of like, God, I'm sounding like a bloody centrist again, but lefties are kind of like, oh, they made this much profit and that's a lot of profit, but sure, you know, tax them more. Absolutely. But can we say that's responsible for the problems in these markets? We need some context for that. We need some context for that. Hello, Khalil Sleemy? Eco Gecko did an amazing breakdown of this a few months back. That sounds interesting. Yeah, exactly. Piprod 101 percentages rather than absolute values. Exactly. That's what I want to see. Just some percentages. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying provide the percentages. Like, give me some goddamn context. I know this is just a newspaper article, by the way, so no disrespect to Christine Berry. This is where I just lose my space. Right, what are we doing? Well, oh yeah, here we are. BP. Okay. But even companies on the wrong end of rising input costs have significant power to decide who takes the hit. Do they pass it on to consumers by hiking prices or to shareholders by squeezing margins? Yeah, again, true. They have that choice, right? In the case of supermarkets, as the campaigner Jack Monroe has made clear, this effectively means power to decide whether the poorest families can afford to eat. The problem is that the companies making these life or death decisions recognize no duty other than to maximize investors' returns. In France, state-owned EDF has shielded citizens from the pain of rising energy costs. In the UK, where public ownership has been systematically dismantled, we lack both the democratic levers and the political will to do the same. Okay, so that looks... Oh, now I have to register. 1 second. Always use archive for anything. So yes, nice one. Archive.is. Let's go back here. Right. So EDF. So France has been able to make the energy company take a hit. Now the question is does this involve the state actually taking a loss? Which is fine, right? That's the state redistributing to poorest citizens via energy prices. That's fine. But is that what it requires? That's my question. In the US, where corporate power is even more concentrated than in the UK, commentators warn that the real danger is not a wage price spiral, but a profit price spiral. US corporate profit margins are at a 70-year high and have risen 37% in the last year alone. In one survey, more than half of retailers admitted to raising prices by more than their increasing costs, with larger firms most likely to be doing so. The narrative about inflation offers a convenient smokescreen for fattening margins, as investors brazenly admit. In the words of one asset manager, what we really want to find are companies with pricing power. In an inflationary environment, that's the gift that keeps on giving. That I have seen this statement before, partly because I've read this article before, but I've seen it around, and it is an interesting statement. That right? That's a really interesting statement from an asset manager. It's worth looking into. In the face of such shameless profiteering, calls for slower wage growth are as economically wrong-headed as they are inhumane. Yes, there is a group who have been creaming off excessive rewards for decades and who now need to tighten their belts in the face of supply shocks. But it's not ordinary workers. As those firebrand socialists at Morgan Stanley recently argued, it's profits that must shrink to absorb the pain of inflation, making up for decades in which capital has increased its share at the expense of workers and consumers alike. More fundamentally, we have to ask whether the UK's world-beating experiment with privatisation has run its course. The astounding sums handed to investors might have passed unnoticed in better times. Today, this largesse is something we quite literally cannot afford. Okay. Right. This is definitely harder than Elden Ring, Nars. Right. So, Morgan Stanley, that seems like something else we can read. So certainly it's true that profits have gained over the past few decades at the expense of wages, relative to wages, right? And margins are higher. I definitely agree with that. But let's try and figure out how much the earnings of the very rich is directly responsible for cost of living, rises in the cost of living, increases in the cost of living, and also let's try and figure out to what degree monopoly power more generally is responsible for it. Okay. So I've got quite a lot of tabs open again. Okay, so this is just earnings. Oh yeah, this is what that's the quote. In an inflationary environment, that's the gift that keeps on giving. Because companies can pass along their pricing on the way up and don't necessarily need to get it back on the way down. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at the France example first. Another Guardian article. Yeah, if I get a good doc together, am I going to share it with the masses? Yes. I can't guarantee I'm going to get a good doc together. But if I do, I shall. Okay. Let's, what can I do to move that along? Actually, can't. That's really irritating. I'll zoom out slightly. Okay. The French government will force EDF, the state energy giant, to take an €8.4 billion financial hit to protect households from rocketing energy costs by limiting bill hikes to 4% this year. The company lost a fifth of its market value on Friday after the French government set out plans to cap rising energy bills, which include forcing EDF to sell electricity generated by its fleet of nuclear reactors to rival home suppliers at well below the current record high market prices. The move underlines pressure on governments across Europe to help households squeezed by the cost of living crisis. The UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak has been accused of being missing in action over soaring energy bills. He's always missing in action. Yeah. One of my friends compared Rishi Sunak to like a kind of absent dad who turns up about once a month with like sweets and things for the kids, but then just like disappears and is nowhere to be seen when there's, when the shit hits the fan, or when there's something important like exams or something, or the kids need help. And I think it's a pretty good analogy, to be honest with you. Anyway, he has been in talks with MPs and companies to agree a package of measures to soften the blow of the national energy crisis, but no decisions have been made. In Spain, the government introduced a windfall tax on electricity generators and gas producers that are able to profit from the record market highs to help keep home energy bills low. Did that work? Taxing them aren't they just going to increase prices? Unless you've got price controls as well. Okay. In Germany, the government has slashed the surcharge on bills used to support renewable energy schemes, which will instead receive extra state subsidies drawn from higher carbon taxes. EDF also told investors that its nuclear power generation for the year ahead will be about 10% lower than initially expected due to technical problems at a handful of its nuclear reactors. The French government, which faced fierce public protest against fuel price hikes in 2018, has already cut some electricity taxes to help slow the rise in home energy bills at an estimated €8 billion cost to the state. Okay. Right, so that costs the state money. Governments across Europe are under pressure to intervene in the energy market to protect households against an unprecedented surge in wholesale market prices, driven by a global gas supply crunch that has lifted markets to all-time highs. Yes, blah, blah, blah. Under the French government's new measures, it has kept a tight lid on the regulated price that EDF is allowed to charge for its nuclear electricity, which will rise to 46.2 euros per megawatt hour from 42 per megawatt hour, despite a record surge in electricity market prices across Europe in recent months. EDF said the plan could hit its earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization by between 7.7 and 8.4 billion euros, based on market prices in December and January. Barbara Pompili, France's environment minister, said the government planned to help with EDF withstand the blow, but has offered no details on this. Okay. Now, so there's not the information I was hoping for in this article. This indicates to me, right, that the price cap implemented by the French government on EDF is forcing them to take a loss. Okay. Now, what that tells you is that it's potentially fine. I'm not saying it's a bad policy. But what it tells you is that the margins, and I know this is a different country and it's a different company, but the margins may be fine enough such that reducing the costs that they're facing is going to require state subsidization. You can't there's not enough in the pockets of shareholders and so forth just to take it from them and kind of give it back. And then all that happens is that, they have one less ivory back scratcher. But I don't know. There's not enough information in this article, which is a bit annoying. String of faults, blah blah blah. Okay, no. So that didn't give me information. Yeah. Okay. So I love listening to you talk and really loosely understanding what you're saying. Yeah. Look, it's just that I don't know that reducing all of the profits, or let's say the excess profits and the excessive shareholder payouts in things like a utility company, I don't know that that would be enough to reduce the cost of living for people. I don't think the magnitudes are quite high enough. Ivory bird that drinks for the cup, yeah. I'm glad you got my reference. Mediocre Age of Empires 4. No, that was ages ago. Yeah, so I don't know that that's the case. And that's what I'm trying to push back against a little bit, because it strikes me that the whole system in the UK and maybe the USA and other countries, I'm sure, is designed so badly that it produces some really perverse outcomes, including increasing prices, right? And that, but it's not as simple as like the bosses are just taking it. Will you horny bastards stop hitting on the teacher? Oh my god, mate, you all really make me laugh. Ban Bitcoin mining. I mean, Bitcoin mining does use a lot of energy. It's interesting. I don't know again in terms of global context if it's actually that much, even though it is a ridiculous amount for what it is. Okay, so here we are. No, why does every website do this now? Such an old man, just getting annoyed. Right. So, to tackle the cost of living crisis, we must end the Great British Rip-Off. A major culprit of the cost of living crisis is hiding in plain sight, an extractive economy that redistributes wealth upwards. Okay, Laurie McFarlane. I like Laurie. Okay, so this is on a similar note, right? Shell lost 20 plus billion in 2020 and made 20 plus billion profit in 2021. Thank you, BT. See, that's exactly the type of thing I'm talking about. I'm not defending Shell. You know, they're an oil company. They shouldn't exist doing what they currently do, as far as I'm concerned. Climate change is a huge problem. And yeah, I'm sure their executives are overpaid. Right, I'm sure. But I don't think... I think it's too simplistic to just say that's what's responsible for rising oil prices. I think it's a broader problem with how we've set up our economy. Right. Oh, I made the mistake of mentioning Bitcoin. Oh, you can all talk about it. You can all talk about it. I'm gonna read out this article, try and distract from all the Bitcoin chat. Well, I shouldn't have mentioned it. Okay. Right. Right. I need water. I need water for all this reading. Right. According to the Bank of England, UK households are facing the biggest fall in living standards since comparable records began. Wow. If you're thinking, haven't we heard this before? That's because the UK has just experienced the worst decade for living standards since records began. To live through 2 lost decades in a row is unprecedented in modern history. For young adults across Britain, rising living standards are now something they have encountered only in history books. Right. Fair enough. When was this written, by the way? Oh, February this year. Okay. Although the cost of living crisis has started to appear in the headlines only recently, it is anything but new. Struggling to make ends meet has been a reality for millions of households for many decades. With around a fifth of households having less than £100 of savings in the bank, any sharp increase in the price of goods and services can mean having to choose between heating and eating. To successfully tackle the cost of living crisis, we must first understand its root cause. The first culprit is a persistent problem of low pay. Real average weekly earnings after inflation is taken into account, are no higher today than they were in 2008. Okay, we need to... Let's just quickly check this this stat. Average weekly earnings in... We're really into the data now. Total pay. Real average weekly earnings. So we're going up to... Wait. What date did Laurie say? 2008. Well, let's go January 2008. Real low index 105.8. Oh, that's really over chat. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Shit. Right, I'm just going to move chat temporarily. Maybe chat is better off there, actually. Where was I? 105.8 index. This is just an index, so it's not actually a number. Right. Normalized at 100 in 2015. And then Laurie wrote this in Feb, 107.6. So we've gone from 105.8 to 107.6. A very slight rise, but ultimately, like, yeah, really, it's basically stagnation. That, yeah. So, and I think, yeah, potentially. I mean, it depends on what reference point you use. That's basically stagnation. So the index is the same as it was in 2008, more or less. So that is basically correct. A slight rise. I'd say there's a slight rise, but it's not massive. Average. Average, you're triggered. Econo boy. Yeah, I mean, total pay, regular pay, real average. Yeah, there's no median. Not obviously. I really just wanted to sense check what he'd said, and I think it's basically correct. So we won't spend too long on the spreadsheets, everybody. Okay, so okay. The stagnant wage growth has been compounded by the erosion of the welfare state. Today, the UK has one of the least generous systems of unemployment support and statutory sick pay among advanced economies. Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, real incomes for the lowest income households were no higher than in 2001 or 2002. 2002, sorry, thanks to years of sustained welfare cuts. Okay. Is this again? Oh, that's like a whole thing by the Resolution Foundation. We might look at that. But what matters for living standards is not simply how much money people earn, but how much they have left over after their essential expenses have been paid. Yeah, okay. I couldn't agree more with this. I think sometimes we don't. As economists, often we think about consumption, right? And it's like, if your income goes up and your consumption goes up in money terms, then your standard of living is assumed to have risen. But if you're just renting like the same house, getting, electricity and stuff, and that all kind of rises, then it's basically experienced as like a decline in standard of living. It's right, my bills were this, now they're this, and I don't see that as any type of gain. So yeah, that kind of thing, adjusting for things like housing expenses, which we have seen earlier in the stream, right? So it is this side of the equation that has been quietly eroding living standards for years. Yeah. Okay. How do you find quality economics research? Let's just pause, sorry, because I know there's a lot of questions in chat. I'm from the I'm a public health professional from the United States, and we have this lovely thing, PubMed, that has all of the extant peer-reviewed articles indexed. Yeah, we don't really have something quite as efficient in economics. You just tend to follow the top journals and the review journals and use Google Scholar. I'm not sure that there's an equivalent of like PubMed or something that really indexes everything in. I mean, I don't know how PubMed works, but it sounds like it's quite a neat advanced indexing tool. I don't think we've got something like that. Is the modern cost of living including basic internet access? Does the bundle of goods get updated for modern expectations of connectivity? Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, internet, it gets updated continually, so things like the internet will be included in it. Wouldn't CPI make sense here? Yeah, I mean, it depends on what goes into CPI. Because sometimes CPI makes sense and sometimes it makes less sense. There's an argument that it understates housing costs, for example. Okay. Do you plan on making a soul takedown anytime soon? Depends how you define soon, Enric. Yeah, I will make it within the year. Last week, anyway, let's carry on, everyone. Last week, the UK energy regulator Ofgem announced that the energy price cap will rise by 54% in April, pushing up bills for millions of households by £693 a year. On the same day, fossil fuel company Shell reported that its annual profits had quadrupled, largely due to the very same soaring gas prices that are responsible for fueling recent spikes in inflation. Okay, like somebody said earlier, right? Shell made a loss in 2020 that was roughly equivalent to the profit they made in 2021. And so this is the type of thing that makes me wonder, are we being a bit too simplistic when we promote this narrative? And another thing I will say about the energy cap, I mean, I know we have the energy cap in the UK, and Bulb, which is actually my energy company, has gone into administration. And so is that just, I mean, I don't know, is that just greedy shareholders? Like, I don't know, maybe they continued to take too much in dividends and the bosses continued to pay themselves too much. I know people were outraged about the boss of Bulb, and his pay was like £250,000 a year. People were annoyed about that, but is it enough? I don't think it's enough to account for these huge economy-wide rises in prices, increases in prices. Right, the magnitudes involved are so much bigger than even the amount that like the greediest executive takes for themselves. Okay, which doesn't mean we can't be pissed off at them. Absolutely not. They're still ripping people off, still overpaid, but that's not what's driving the cost of living crisis, I don't think. But again, we're researching, we're open-minded, we're trying to figure it out. What's my energy company? I just said, right? Bulb. Did I not say it? Or maybe I didn't say it clearly. Oh, Econ Lit isn't too bad. Yeah, it is. Econ Lit isn't too bad. Okay. In other words, not everyone is feeling the pinch of the cost of living crisis. As household budgets are squeezed even further, fossil fuel company shareholders are laughing all the way to the bank. That is descriptively an accurate statement. Energy is far from the only sector where one person's pain is another's gain. In recent decades, many of our most essential services have become engines of extractive redistribution, taking wealth away from workers and funneling it upwards to asset owners. There is perhaps no more basic need than water. Since the sector was privatised in England in 1989, bills have increased by 40% above inflation. At the same time, more than £50 billion has been paid out to shareholders in dividends, while companies have been loaded up with debt. Okay. Bills have gone up a lot. But again, what's the context for this number? Like, because we can't relate these numbers, right? Bills have increased by 40%, but then this is a nominal value. 50 billion has been paid out to shareholders across 30 years, while companies have been loaded up with debt. I mean, yeah, look, maybe they're being badly managed. I'm willing to believe these utilities, since they've been privatized, are badly managed. From what I know, that they are quite short-termist, and they're structured in very odd ways sometimes, thanks to the genius of various UK governments and powerful actors who used to manage the civil service companies, and now they manage the private companies, and they've made a pretty penny. Yeah, sure, maybe they're badly managed, but is that responsible? Okay. 50 billion is 800 per every citizen of the UK. But that's 50 that's not 50 billion per year, mute. That's 50 billion over 30 years, right? So what, £30 per person per year in the UK? According to research by the University of Greenwich, households in England are paying 2.3 billion more a year for their water and sewerage bills under the current privatised system than if the water companies had remained in public ownership. Okay, so maybe we'll take a look at this study in a bit. Where's my archive thing? We're finished with the EDF article. It wasn't as informative as we'd hoped. Cool. That one's ready. That one's ready for later. Anyone who regularly travels by train in the UK will know that rail fares are often mind-bogglingly expensive. Since rail services were privatised in 1994, rail fares have increased by a fifth in real terms. Speaking in the House of Commons on the eve of privatisation, John McGregor, the Conservative Transport Secretary, promised that privatisation would harness the management skills, the financial disciplines, the entrepreneurial spirit, bringing lower rail fares, increased consumer choice, and soaring investment. Okay, I mean that's a lol, right? That is a lot. Like it didn't. it clearly didn't. Especially since the major rail investment in the UK is high speed too, which is completely or almost completely government financed. So. Yeah, and management skills, lower lower rail fares, increase consumer choice. Yeah, I think this is one of the things with rail. It's like consumer choice. Like which fucking train am I going to get? I'm going to get the train that goes along the rails that take me from point A to point B. Like which one am I going to get? The blue one or the red one? That it doesn't. You can't have that kind of consumer choice. So I don't even know what he meant. What he would have meant saying that. So. But the reality for many customers has been rather different. Late services, yes. Spiralling ticket costs, yes. And costs and overcrowding. Meanwhile, private train operators have paid out more than £8.3 billion in dividends to shareholders, returns that have been funded almost entirely by a complex web of public subsidies. Yeah, okay. So there are, you do, that is true. The rail system in the UK now, it's like privatized, but there's public elements and it's regulated. But there is this fact that I think it's like the subsidies to the companies now are like higher than the running costs of the nationalized system way back when. So yeah, like it's a rip-off, right? It is a rip-off. There's no denying it. But we need broader systemic change to actually improve the system, I think, rather than just saying you can't pay shareholders, as much as you're currently paying them. Perhaps the largest expense for many households is housing costs. For much of the past half-century, housing has served two conflicting functions in the economy. On the one hand, housing is a basic need, providing shelter, security, and warmth. From this perspective, it is desirable for house prices and rents to stay low to ensure that housing is affordable. On the other hand, housing has become one of the primary vehicles for accumulating wealth. From this perspective, it is desirable for house prices and rents to increase, enabling those who own property to grow their wealth over time. These two roles are in direct conflict with each other. Housing cannot simultaneously be affordable and lucrative as an investment at the same time, as much as politicians like to pretend otherwise. In recent decades, government policy has sought to promote the latter role at the direct expense of the former, with dire consequences for the millions of households that are locked out of home ownership. Yeah, so I buy that. The political goal of home ownership and, increasing availability of certain types of credit and mortgages, I think there's been, plus some of the factors that were involved in the 2000s housing boom, these have increased house prices, and it is seen as an investment for people. And if you have an asset that's an investment, you're expecting prices to rise, okay? And if prices of housing are rising, then obviously it's going to get more difficult for people to get their foot on the ladder, and especially for younger generations, right? So I do buy that. So Econo Boy, why do you think it can be affordable and lucrative as an investment? Because it does seem to me that if you have rising house prices, if you expect the price of your house to rise and make you money beyond just rising with normal inflation, then it does strike me that you would end up pricing some people out. While economists and politicians hail a booming housing market as a sign of wealth creation, in reality it's one of the most powerful forms of wealth redistribution. When the price of a house goes up, the total productive capacity of the economy is unchanged because nothing new has been produced. It merely constitutes an increase in the value of an existing asset. While this increases the net wealth of individual homeowners and landlords, for everyone else it often means facing higher rents in the rental market and having to save for a deposit and pay more interest on larger mortgages. The reality is that the housing ladder is rather like a zero-sum game. The wealth enjoyed by some is mirrored by the deprivation and exclusion of others. Yeah, generally true. Assuming people aren't reinvesting, right? Assuming the gains aren't being kind of reinvested in affordable housing, for example, which, let's face it, they haven't been. It would be less lucrative, but there's an amount of housing stock demand that people will have that will be filled by the private market, even in systems with a heavy amount of cooperative and social housing. I'm not sure. I guess the issue is that land, let's say land, is limited, right? Especially in certain locations. So I guess you could say you can always get a house in somewhere, right? I mean, I could move to Coventry, right? I could move to Coventry. I really don't want to. I could get a really cheap house in Coventry. So in that sense, the market has provided. But ultimately, if I'm talking about moving somewhere where like everyone is and where there's like opportunity, then the house prices there are going to be higher, and there's going to be limited space for the market to provide new housing, right? I mean, that's the central problem of land. That's why we need proper management of land and land taxes and community land trusts and things like that, rather than the current model we have. Out of the whole of the UK, you pick Coventry. I mean, yeah, I picked it for a reason. So we're nearly at the end of this article. So we'll read this and then we'll take a break not in terms of stepping away from the computer, in terms of assimilating what we've learned. Similarly, extractive dynamics can be found in Britain's social care sector, which represents a growing expense for millions of households. The sector is now largely owned by private equity firms, which were lured by the prospect of steady income streams and large property portfolios. In recent years, a number of private equity-owned care home companies have been condemned for operating extractive business models characterized by excessive cash extraction, unsustainable debt, and opaque corporate structures. A 2019 report by the Centre for Health and Public Interest, an independent think tank, found that of a total annual income of £15 billion, an estimated £1.5 billion per year leaks out of the care home industry. Okay, that's exactly the type of context I want to see, right? Right? Okay, so that's 10%, right? So you're that. Yes, good stuff. That's what I want to see. That tells you that's quite a lot, right? Yeah, in the form of rent, dividend payments, interest payments, management fees, and profits, money that could otherwise be spent on frontline care. These dynamics have contributed to the cost of care in residential homes soaring by almost 30% since 2012, rising from £27,000 to £35,000 a year. Yeah, so this first bit has some context. I'd like to see again more context for this. You know, how much would this have solved this? You know, like reinvesting this have solved this? That's my question. I like how your accent gets stronger when you get excited. That's well funny. I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah, the care sector's a fucking shitstorm as far as I'm concerned. I don't know that much about it. What I know, I think is bad. I think honestly, it's horrible, and it's one of. I mean, all of these things affect people's lives, right? But when you're talking about care and people, you know, corruption and people extracting money from the care sector, you're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in society in a very underfunded industry. I think, yeah, it makes me a bit sick, to be honest. There can be no doubt that the cost of living crisis is a real concern, but it is not new, and it is simply the result of rising gas prices. Oh, it's not simply the result of rising gas prices, sorry. For decades, British households have been squeezed by a pincer movement of persistently low incomes on the one hand and extractive business models on the other. Unless urgent action is taken on both fronts, another lost decade looks all but inevitable. Okay. Okay, so the questions that have been raised so far, let's take a little step. Psychosocialism, I've got a video that addresses some of this stuff coming out very soon. That's cool. Psycho, I will surely watch it. God, I'm very behind on my YouTube videos at the moment, actually. Because I've been doing stuff in real life and seeing stuff in real life. Right, okay, so central question. Does rising profits and do rising profits, good English, and executive pay account for countrywide increases in the cost of living? Okay. So there are different sectors. So we know. So are we going to do another bullet point level? Is that going to make it too small? Let's do another. Let's just do it. Let's just do another bullet point level. We're going absolutely wild on the Unlearning Economics stream. Okay. Hello, potential plateau. Tyra, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thank you very much. Right. So, do rising profits and executive pay account for countrywide increases in the cost of living? And so, we've got water sector, energy sector, housing sector, and care sector, and transport sector, mostly trains. Mostly trains. Right, okay, so we've got, these are the ones that I think have been identified the most, right, in what we've read. Housing, energy, water, care, and transport, mostly trains. And, yeah, we can put food in there as well, yeah. Even though I actually haven't seen it mentioned in these, but we'll put it in there. We'll put it in there. Right. So, now, this, let me put some of the references down here as well, so we can keep track of them. We'll keep track of them in the order that we've read them. Oh, I got rid of that France one. Okay. I'll tidy that up later. After the stream. Okay, so we want to know Will this stream be saved as a video on this channel? No, it will be saved as a video on my other channel. It will be saved as a video on Unlearning Economics Live. Because it's just the algorithm, really, and it's nice. I think it's nice to have one channel that's like scripted videos, prepared videos, and another that's like live streams. What am I doing? Water sector. So care sector, right? So this is. This is not looking very nice. I don't like it. I've got an idea. No. Right, okay, so those need to be. We're going to spend at least as much time formatting this as. Oh, that didn't copy the hyperlinks. Mate, what? That's just irritating. Plugging the leaks in the UK care home industry. Right. We'll put that in there and that in there. I don't know if we're going to get round to care. Because it's not. I don't think it's what's driving the cost of living for most households, right? That's kind of what I'm interested in. But we'll put that in there anyway. And, you know, maybe today or another day, I don't know. We can delete that. All right. And, okay, so profiting amid the energy crisis. The distribution, right, okay, so this energy sector. So this is one we need to read, probably next. And privatize water. We can put that there. What's my preferred citation style? I've always liked Chicago, you know. I've always liked Chicago because it I like having it just in little footnotes because it doesn't really interrupt the text. And we need to look at RMT policy briefing on trains. Profiteering on Great British Railways. Cost of dividends. All right, so we'll put this on here. Actually, I think that's probably the right link. We're just assembling something here at the moment, everybody. Housing costs. So I don't. Housing costs, okay, again, is a big one. There's not that much in Laurie's article. What about this one? House prices have risen. Average rents have risen 8.6% in the last year. A third of income. English housing survey. We're interested in what's driving these things, right? Hmm. Yeah, I'm a secret Chicago school economist for sure. So housing. So buy-to-let investors have swallowed up. How Britain's housing market went wrong and what we can do to fix it. Okay, maybe let's put this one in the housing bit. So I want to get this report that I used in one of my videos. The Great British Train Robbery. One second. I'll just see if I can find this. Hello, Orion. What am I doing? Um, here we are. Action, overcrowded trains. Action for rail. No, not this one. One second. I'm gonna have to go on my own video to find this link. God, where are we? So, just as geez. Okay. Okay. Passenger satisfaction. This really influenced me. Why is that reference not in there? I can't even reference properly. I can't find my own. Is it on Sean's video? Hello everyone. Is this it? The Great Train Robbery. Right, now the reason I'm so bothered about getting this this report is because it did change my opinion quite a lot on this. And no? No, you're not allowed to search in the search bar. That's not what it's for, isn't it obvious? Urban experiments, infrastructures of social change. This is. Whoa. Okay, no, that's not what I want. One second. Oh, I've got a version of it. The Great Train Robbery, rail privatization, and after. Oh, here it is. Okay. So we'll put this on the train bit. Now I'll do one thing actually, which is that I will and God, this is looking so ugly already, this thing. I will read out. Let me just read out this quote. Okay, here we are. Okay, so they're talking. So they're called rail privatization in the UK. They called it a Great Train Robbery, right? And they say this, right? Because the Great Train Robbery. Well, no, it'll. Okay, so yeah. So I'll read it out and then we'll find out what it is. The metaphor of train robbery provides us with an analogy and disanalogy. In the first Great Train Robbery of August 1963, a gang of South London criminals robbed the Royal Mail by stopping the Glasgow to London Mail train, coshing the driver, and then in a human chain passing some £2.5 million in cash from the high-value packages carriage into a waiting truck. The second Great Train Robbery, as described in this report, is about companies that managed a bigger heist of public funds by running trains up and down the lines after rail privatisation. The 1993 Railways Act created a new structure with opportunities for positioning by train operating and rolling stock companies who could quite legally distribute direct and indirect state subsidy to benefit their owners. Right. Basically, There are companies that receive state subsidies, both the people who own the trains and the people who operate the trains, who are actually different for some reason in the UK system, because that makes sense. So those companies can basically cream off the top of these state subsidies, right? The analogy is a nice one because it brings out the important point that the proceeds of train robbery are in both cases fairly modest sums, which are nevertheless very attractive in terms of reward for effort. The £2.5 million stolen in 1963 had to be divided between more than 15 full gang members into individual shares of about £150,000, and, after inevitable deductions for safekeeping, none of the gang members, except possibly Gordon Goody, maybe he's the leader, I don't know, was set up for life. Nevertheless, the full share was attractive in terms of reward for risk, because the train gang members' share was much larger than the average smash and grab. Much the same point could be made about the train operating companies. The sum extracted as dividends in any one year is modest in relation to subsidy or operating revenue, as Exhibit 7 shows. In 2011, the dividend amounted to a modest £160 million against public subsidy of £2.5 billion and revenue of £7.6 billion, right? So that is a fraction, right? That's less than 10% of the public subsidy that they're getting, and it's, I don't know, 2% of the revenue of the train companies. So all that is to say, the dividend that the shareholders get from the privatized trains in the UK is low. It's plenty for them. Yeah, it's loads of money. It's more money than I make, or probably any of us make, right? Maybe not any of us, but almost all of us. Is more money than we usually make, but it just wouldn't be able to fix the trains if you said, okay, you're not allowed dividends anymore. That's not the problem. The problem is that we have a hugely inefficient, ineffective system with managers that don't care and weird fragmented structure where different companies own the trains and operate the trains and own the rails, and it's partly public, mostly private, but it's just really terribly managed. And that's the problem, right? And that, to me, is what is driving higher train prices. That the system as a whole is terrible. It's not the case that you could just overnight reduce, or you couldn't overnight just reduce dividends and therefore reduce prices by paying for them with the unclaimed dividends. You wouldn't be able to do that. There's not enough of them. What you'd have to do is have state subsidies, right? The train companies would have to incur a loss in order to stop prices rising, and therefore you'd need the state to subsidize it. And in a broader sense, you'd need a much better system that operated more effectively. Have you considered putting these foolish ambitions to rest? Oh, God. Right. Yes. Right. So. My tab management is pretty terrible, but I know what I'm going to do next. I want to look at the water sector and the energy sector. I think the chat's probably better on the right-hand side, isn't it? Okay, so are the water and energy sectors analogous to the train sector in that the dividends aren't actually that big a factor in the context of the entire industry and the entire market? That's what we're trying to establish here. Consumers in England are paying £2.3 billion more a year for their water and sewerage systems under the current privatised system than if the utility companies had remained in state ownership, according to research by the University of Greenwich. No. Why do they do that? Just like newspapers, they just have a link that just links to everything the FT's written with utility in it. That's not what I wanted. I wanted the report. Is this one of those articles that isn't actually going to link to the report at all? These adverts are annoying me. Right. The 9 English regional water and sewerage companies, 3 of which are listed on the stock market and 6 of which are owned privately, have invested no significant new shareholder equity, but extracted nearly all of their post-tax profit as dividends, according to the Greenwich University report, which calculated the cost of privatisation to each household as over £100 a year. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere, right? Now we can look at these calculations. I want to see where they come from, but now we're getting somewhere because we're placing it in context. So yeah, they've taken almost all of their post-tax profit as dividends, and this is clearly, if that is true, the cost of this to each household is over 100 a year, then yes, you can say here privatization has driven an increase in the cost of living. This is what I want to see. This is much clearer. At the same time, the companies have built up a growing pile of debt to finance investments over the 28 years since the industry was privatized. This is an expensive way to finance infrastructure, said Dr. Kate Bayliss, a research associate at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London, who co-authored the study. It means that little extra money in real terms has come from shareholders, while investment has largely been financed by commercial borrowing. Okay. So they're not financing through shareholder equity, right? They're financing through borrowing. Now, my first inclination is to ask: is there a reason for that? You know, could there be a justification for that? Corporate finance isn't something that I'm really expert on. Will there be a VOD for this stream? Well, I'm going to upload it to the Unlearning Economics Live channel, which is new, afterwards. Anyway, so yeah. So could there be justification for financing investment through borrowing while not using equity? Is there anything to be gained by paying out your profits to the shareholders, existing shareholders? If they're really effective, but I don't know. If they're really effective at managing the company and you want to retain them, that's one potential implication, but I wouldn't assume that they are, right? England is the only country to have fully privatised its water and sewerage system, with ownership transferred from the state to large regional monopolies in 1989. Investors paid £7.6 billion for the water and sewerage companies in 1989, but the UK government took on the sector's entire £4.9 billion in debt and gave the new private corporations £1.5 billion of public funds. Right. So they bought them debtless, and then they got some basically cash back from the government. I mean, sounds about right. I don't know. It's pretty standard for privatization, right? That things like that happen. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's standard. Okay. My man really out here without an ad blocker. Yeah, I am. I should. I can't remember. I remember them just at one point being more trouble than they were worth. Ad blockers, right? Like, tell me a good one, please. But I remember at one point they just got more annoying and they were blocking things that I didn't want them to block, and I was just like, right, I spend more time clicking on no ad blocker, don't do this, than I would clicking on no to the adverts. So therefore, I'm going to delete it. But that was a while ago. Maybe I should reconsider. Yuri says H. I presume that means hi, Yuri. Whoa, uBlock Origin. Jesus Christ, you all together? Are you all together and on and on mission? Well, there was so much uBlock Origin that they all arrived at exactly the same time. Okay, all right, we're getting distracted. We'll get uBlock Origin in another stream. I'll note that down myself. Okay, continuing with the article. But the Labour Party, which wants to return the water and sewerage companies to state control, has put renationalisation back on the agenda as the general election looms. So this is 2019. 2017. Okay. I mean, that's fine. That is, same applies. Wait. So bad at finding my place again. Many voters have voiced growing concerns over rising prices and poor performance by some companies on leakages and pollution. Thames Water received a record £20 million fine in March for dumping more than 4.2 billion litres of raw sewage into the River Thames. Yeah, okay, look, so that's not on, right? That's classic. That's classic. A classic economics 101 or 102 example of a company, not accounting for externalities, dumping raw sewage. The owners of 9 companies, many of which are overseas investors, including sovereign wealth funds, paid out £18.1 billion in dividends in the 10 years to 2016, even though post-tax profits amounted to £18.8 billion during the decade, according to the researchers' analysis of their financial reports. 3 companies, Anglian Water Group, Severn Trent Water, and Yorkshire Water Services, have paid out more in dividends than their total pre-tax profits over the past decade, a situation Dr. Bayliss said was not economically sustainable. Yes, that is clearly true. You can't pay more than you earn, right? Sounds like these companies need to tighten their belts and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Okay, last month Severn Trent pledged to increase its annual dividend by at least 4 percentage points above the rate of inflation until March 2020. Post-tax profits and dividends. Right, so many of them, the light pink line is more than the dark pink line. And it's basically equal on average. Greenwich researchers said the cost of maintaining and improving water and sewer infrastructure has been paid for almost entirely with an increase in debt, which has risen from almost zero at the time of privatisation to nearly £40 billion in 2016. The interest payments on the debt are higher than what would be paid by the public sector, which can borrow more cheaply. That's true. Yeah. That is one advantage of nationalisation and government funding and running things. Definitely lower interest rate payments, more ability to borrow. Together, the £1.8 billion in dividends and the extra £500 million of debt interest payments each year pushed up bills for each of England's 23 million households by about £100 a year, the researchers said. If all we are getting is debt, while we are financing company dividends, it clearly would have been better for these utilities to be in the public sector, said Dr. Bayliss. Michael Roberts, chief executive of Water UK, which represents the industry, said the flawed report does not do justice to the achievements of the water industry since privatisation. He added, in that time, the industry has invested over £130 billion in better services. Today we have world-class drinking water quality and customer satisfaction levels of over 90%. Importantly, the independent regulator Ofwat, how do you say that? Ofwat, has said that prices in England and Wales would be 30% higher without the move from public ownership. Okay, so the regulator has said that as well. Okay. So that conflicts with what the report says, right? Obviously. In 2011, Ofwat estimated that prices were about £110 lower than they would have been had the utilities remained in the public sector. The average household water bill in 2011 was £356. Now, look. Let me just say one thing here before, and I want to delve into this a bit more. Let me say one thing here. Regulators can be captured by the industries that they're regulating. Hello, Lutheros. Nice of you to join us. Thanks for joining the stream. Regulators can be captured It's called regulatory capture. It's an extremely well-known phenomenon. One of the things about the off regulators, Ofwat, Ofcom, is it Ofgen? They are funded by the industries they regulate. Now, not in the sense of the industries they regulate being owners. They're funded by fees that the industries pay, right? But you can see that there may be a conflict of interest there. Now, I don't like to just say, oh, you're biased, you're corrupt, therefore I'm not going to believe what you say outright. What I'm trying to say is that this dude saying the independent regulator Ofwat, no, like ignore that bit, right? Just see Ofwat has said, ignore these three words, delete them, delete them out. Can't get rid of them. Okay. Importantly, Ofwat has said that prices in England and Wales would be 30% higher without the move from public ownership. So what we have here are conflicting reports, right? The average bill across England and Wales is now about £400, according to Ofwat, which declined to comment for this story. According to a National Audit Office report in 2015, household water bills have risen by 40% more than inflation since 1989. Okay, so yeah, again, you get a situation where these needs, like water, are rising faster than standard inflation. Oh god, I just deleted my entire chat. That's so annoying. When I reload it, it just deletes it all. Now I can't scroll back up in the future and like check things. That's really irritating. Hot girls and boys in the video chat. There are already hot girls and boys in the video chat. We don't need the spam. Okay. The University of Greenwich researchers argue that public ownership would cut the company's costs by at least £2.3 billion per year by eliminating the payment of dividends and reducing the cost of interest payments. They say that if the government had to pay compensation of £20 billion to investors, the annual savings would provide taxpayers with an annual return of more than 10% on the investment. Across Europe, there has been a wave of renationalizations as cities including Paris and Berlin have taken water and sewer systems back under local authority control as outsourcing contracts come to an end. A comprehensive study of water supply services by economists at the Paris Sorbonne University of France, where about 3/4 of water and sewage services are delivered by the private sector through concessions or lease contracts, found that the price of water provided by private companies in 2004 was 16.6% higher than in areas where municipalities provide the service. Okay. That last fact is important. That's a very important comparative fact, right? So we know that in France, where it's privatized, the costs are 16.6% higher, which is a lot, right? That's a lot. XRXaholic. Regulatory capture and revolving door shit is the most mundane, well-documented, and obvious problem of how corporations interact with public political bodies. Yes, exactly. Like, yeah, it is. It's not, yeah, it's not controversial, is it? You don't even need to do class analysis to understand regulatory capture. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, don't let anybody tell you that you're being like conspiratorial if you're saying that regulatory capture happens, because it just like does. Careful, Patrick. You might get banned. Like, not obviously directly, but like by the filter, because although it seems really bad at picking up the actual ones, it does sometimes pick up people who aren't. Right, okay, so next step. So Bayliss, Dr. Bayliss, what's her name? Kate Bayliss. Let's go on my favorite website. Kate Bayliss. Financialization of water. See, this really annoys me. Since let's do 2015. Material cultures of water financialization in England and Wales. I don't think that's it. Inequality, poverty, and the privatization of essential services. The systems of provision study of water, energy, and local buses in the UK. Now that does sound... This does sound relevant. This paper is concerned with the distributional effects of the deregulation and privatisation of essential services in Britain since the 1980s, based on a cross-sector study of water, energy and local bus transport. Our approach locates end users within the structures and processes and prevailing narratives that underpin both production and consumption. This framework highlights the ways that the provisioning of these vital services is contested, contradictory and underpinned by power relations. We show that at one end, investors in these sectors have made generous returns on their investments, but their methods of profit maximization are often not in the public interest. Meanwhile, these profits are financed by end users' payments of bills and fares. Many lower income households face challenges in terms of affording and even accessing these essential services. Regulation has failed to provide adequate social protection. Shut up, Econo Boy. We argue that adverse social outcomes emerge from systemic factors embedded in these modes of provision. A narrative of politically neutral, technocratic solutions belies the underlying contested nature of privatized, monopolistic, shared essential services. Moreover, a policy preoccupation with markets and competition obscures the inequality embedded in the underlying structures and processes and undermines more collective and equitable forms of provisioning. Wait, so is this a theoretical paper? No, there's data in this. It sounds theoretical at times. I think they're kind of putting forward a taxonomy. This does look like an interesting paper. The thing is, reading a paper will take like hours. Well, an hour live on stream. 1 second. Investors and investment practices. I don't think that is the paper. So let's try Kate Bayliss, Greenwich, water privatization. Oh, is this it? Okay, so it wasn't on Google Scholar for some reason. I mean, I guess it's just a report. This looks like it might be it. Let me just cross check. I mean, it almost certainly is. 2.3 billion. Yeah, okay, 2.3 billion. Right, okay, maybe we can read this. Maybe we can have a look at this. So, to remind everybody, what we're trying to establish is the extent to which monopolies, privatization, let's say neoliberal capitalism, as a summary, has contributed to the cost of living crisis. And thanks, Rasmus. I'm glad you could join us. So anyway, and there are different ways that can happen. It can happen because the private owners and shareholders and the executives and the managers and blah blah blah, they are all creaming off the top, and there's no money left to improve the services and decrease prices and pay workers and all the good stuff that we want from our water system or our utility system. So that can happen. Or it can be like a more subtle process where privatization as we currently have it, at least in the UK, is just a bad model. And that filters through into prices, quality, as well as executives making a lot of money for themselves. But it's not directly the case necessarily that we could just take the money that they make and reinvest it into the system, into the industry, into the firm, and eliminate the problem. It's not as simple as that. So that's my inclination. But if this report is correct, it does seem that actually water, at least, may be a case where actually there's not enough oversight and there are a lot of dividends being paid out for not much gain, and essentially the dividends are enough that you could save households a substantial amount by somehow regulating them or reducing them. Vandana, yeah, I think so. Maybe not this time, but well, this is, I mean, this is a paper. It's kind of a paper, right? Bringing water into public ownership: costs and benefits. Okay, so it's a cost-benefit analysis by Kate Bayliss and David Hall. Let's I actually, what? One second. I'm just trying to move this across to make it that right. That's better, isn't it? Why didn't I do that earlier? Cool. The present system of provision of water and sewerage in England consists of 9 large regional private water and sewerage companies, with a few smaller private water-only companies, which both own the entire assets of the system and are licensed monopolies of water and sewerage services in their areas. The water providers in Scotland and Northern Ireland remain in the public sector. In Wales, water is provided by a not-for-profit company. 3 of the English companies are listed on the London Stock Exchange, while 6 have been delisted and are now owned privately. Okay. The problems of the English system are upward pressure on pricing due to payments of dividends and debt interest, narrow regulation by Ofwat, with a system of price controls that fails to deal with all of the methods of value extraction by shareholders. Okay, interesting. Poor performance, for example, in terms of leakage and sewage flooding, for which companies continue to be fined millions of pounds in 2016 and 2017. Lack of accountability or public control, with complex corporate structures, a dense web of intercompany loans, and opaque offshore ownerships in some cases. Yeah, that sounds like UK privatisation. That sounds roughly correct. Rising inequality, as many struggle to pay water bills, which feed into dividend payments to some of the world's richest. Okay. Hello, Natty Boy. The bad institution story doesn't explain why cost of living has only recently risen so sharply. Well, it can do, because you can have a system that is not well suited to surviving shocks, right? So you can have a system with a lack of resilience. And this is like a big thing that's, resilience and robustness have become a big buzzwords during the pandemic, haven't they? Because if you have a system where, shutting it down or losses of key supplies have a massive effect because there's only one source for them. You've got things like just-in-time production where everything's balanced on a knife edge. It could be that something like the pandemic would exacerbate that, right? So that's one thing. The other question is whether that asset manager that we saw a bit earlier was correct, and an inflationary environment allows corporate stakeholders with a lot of market power to take advantage of the situation and increase prices. Okay. The private sector paid very little for these companies at the time of privatization in 1989. Investors paid £7.6 billion for the shares, but the government took over all the debts of the sector worth £4.9 billion and gave the new private corporations a green dowry of £1.5 billion, a combined injection of £6.4 billion of public funds. The companies were thus effectively debt-free at the time of privatisation. Yeah, so they almost entirely offset it, really, the government, in 1989 when they sold them off. A report by the National Audit Office puts capital investment since privatisation at $126 billion. However, this has largely been financed by debt, as Chart A shows. The value of shareholder equity investment has hardly changed in the past 25 years. So the companies have financed investment by increasing borrowings rather than investing their own capital. Debts come at a cost. Yes. Right. So investment has grown over time, but that's in billions, so it's not, it's grown with the economy. But what did it look like before privatization, right? That's the question. There's no comparison point here. Now, we can see that debt, relatively, it was just equity before, right? At the beginning, and debt has grown, so that's the point they're making, which is fair. But I'm just wondering what investment looked like before privatization. So Thatcher just gave the industry for pennies. Oh my God, she'd never have done such a thing. Never. Tables 1 to 3 review the finances of the 9 regional English companies over the past 10 years. On average, the 9 companies have paid nearly £1.5 billion per year in net finance costs. The cost of this debt is much higher than it would be for public sector bodies. The yield on government gilts is about 1.2%, whereas Ofwat assumes the private companies pay more than double this rate. So the difference is equivalent to more than £500 million per year on the combined net debt of £42 billion. So £500 million per year. Capital investment at like, what, 10 billion up to 60 billion. I mean, £500 million isn't that much, right? It's not that much in the context of the industry. Again, this is the thing I'm talking about again and again. £500 million, a lot for any individual, but not that much in terms of the entire industry. While sector debt has been rising, shareholders have been extracting dividends. Table 1 provides summary data compiled from the water and sewerage companies' annual reports over the past 10 years. The table shows that almost all of the post-tax profit of £18.8 billion has been paid out in dividends. Arguably, these are funds that could have been used to finance physical investment or to reduce company debt, and thereby lower debt interest payments. Yeah, okay. I mean, I think this one is more important than this one. Physical investment, like the debt payments are still relatively low. Furthermore, 3 companies, Anglian, Severn Trent, and Yorkshire, have paid out more in dividends than their total pre-tax profits. This is not economically sustainable. Right, okay, so what are these gargantuan tables saying? Pre-tax profit. Right, so these are the kind of figures we want, right? Pre-tax profit, tax, post-tax profit. Wait, why is the tax so low? That's pretty striking, isn't it? Wait, so pre-tax profit is 20 billion. And the tax is a really small fraction of that. So the Anglian Water made 3 billion and paid 11 million in tax. I'm struggling to cope. I'm struggling to cope with that. I'm struggling to cope with that. That's not in line with the corporate tax rate. I don't know what is going on there. What is going on there? That is just tax. It's just tax evasion, isn't it? Whatever. That is not the UK corporate tax rate. The UK corporate tax rate is like 24% or something. I love that. Yeah, gotta love those deductibles. That is fucking fuck off, Anglian Water. Right. Okay. Post-tax profit, 3 million. Yeah, the same amount as pre-tax profit. Because you don't pay any fucking taxes. Oh my god. Dividends, higher. Yeah. Um, Retained earnings, negative 700. Net finance costs, right, more than that. The money they've borrowed. Okay. So generally speaking, they're making some money. They're not paying very much in tax. They're giving basically all of their profit away as dividends, not retaining very much in terms of earnings, and borrowing money to invest, which is what the text said, right? What's this? Regional Water and Sewage Companies finances 2006. Oh, these are annual. This is just the same thing in annual averages. Okay, we don't really care too much about that. Yorkshire had a negative tax. Wait. Oh my god, they did. Yorkshire had negative tax. I can't. The good people of Yorkshire deserve better than that Yorkshire Water. This is why I don't pay my water bill yet. Fair enough, mate. Oh, Trev Ken, I recognise your name. That second table is just the first table divided by 10. Yeah. Regional Water and Sewage Companies finances 2016. Net debt, equity, gearing, and highest paid director in millions. Let's continue with the text. So the cost of maintaining and improving the infrastructure for the last 28 years has not been financed by investors. It has been met by borrowing. With most of the profit allocated to dividends, the companies have been borrowing ever-increasing amounts in order to pay for the actual physical investment. I mean, it is stupid, right? I accept that it's absurd. I'm just saying the interest payments on that debt aren't really the thing that we need to be worrying about. On its face, it's stupid. Maybe there's an explanation. I don't know. Somebody give me an explanation. Late to stream. What did I miss? You've missed 2 hours of me reading about the cost of living. Okay. So the cost of hasn't been. The companies which were debt free at privatisation in 1989 have now accumulated over £40 billion in debt, which finances over 3/4 of the company's assets. All companies have now been taken over by consortia of financial investors, 3 of which are registered in Jersey, and these have all undertaken a complex securitization exercise via a subsidiary set up in the Cayman Islands, which allows them to hike up debt levels still further. There we go. That may explain the low corporate tax rates. Table 3 shows that these are the companies with the highest gearing ratios: Anglian, Southern, Thames and Yorkshire. Thames Water in 2016 recorded net debt of over £10 billion. In the securitised structures, a licensed water utility sits in a complex web of companies where dividend and interest payments flow to and from group companies, so that the flow of funds is very difficult to track. Aside from the complexities of intercompany transfers, high debts have led to increased interest payments. Despite the Despite the profitability of the sector, water companies pay little tax. In a 10-year review of the company accounts, the combined tax charge in profit and loss accounts comes to £1.7 billion on a pre-tax profit of £20.7 billion, around 8%. Actual tax paid can be much, much lower. In 2013, for example, the shareholders extracted nearly £1 billion in dividends but paid only £1 million in taxes. In 2016, water and sewerage companies paid out a total of £1.45 billion in net interest payments and £1.482 billion in dividends, which is equivalent to over 28% of turnover. Now that's a lot, right? Wait, okay, maybe I was wrong about the net interest payments. Did I get something wrong when I said... But they said they were 500 million. Oh, the difference. The difference is equivalent to five. So they pay 500 million more than a public company would pay. But then the total is 1 point. Okay, so it would be under $1 billion in net interest payments if the government had borrowed it, and it would be zero if they'd financed it from equity. Okay, so that is so. I can see why they're so. I was a bit confused about that. I can see why they're so concerned about net interest payments now. It's the same amount as dividends, right? Since privatization in 1989, household bills have risen by 40% more than inflation. On average, over the past 10 years, water and sewerage companies have paid over $1.8 billion per year in dividends, which equates to about £75 per household per year. This is an expensive way to finance infrastructure. So what is the justification for paying these dividends then? Are the shareholders running the company really well? I don't know. It seems like costs are rising lots. So that would be one. Well, prices, costs for households, prices for the for the firm. Their prices are rising a lot. So that would be suggestive of bad management on its face. And I don't know, they're borrowing a lot of money. They're not financing via equity. What have they done right is the question. What have they done right? I'm saying what I'm trying to get at. No, you're saying I know the justification is that they like money, but like what is it? What I'm saying is what is the argument for it? Why, for example, does the report by Ofwat, why does that, why do they come to different conclusions? Do they think that the shareholders are doing a good job such that it justifies the payouts? The regulator Ofwat has not provided a great, has not proved a great obstacle to the companies, as noted by the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee, which stated in 2016 that Ofwat, like other economic regulators, has repeatedly overestimated the cost of finance in successive price reviews. As a result, water companies made windfall gains of at least £1.2 billion between 2010 and 2015 from bills being higher than necessary. Shareholders are likely to have made additional financial gains outside the scope of the regulator, for example from shareholder loans at higher than market rates of interest, from the sale of land and property, and from the sale of ownership stakes in the utility. However, the full amounts are difficult to determine, in part due to dense corporate structure and to limited disclosure. Australian investors Macquarie, for example, sold their remaining 26% stake in Thames Water for an undisclosed sum earlier this year. Okay, so why? So equity finance. So two things. So there's two things here, right? Econo boy. One is equity financing versus debt financing. So equity financing doesn't require that you pay interest, right? So what's the advantage of debt financing? But the second is, are the payouts to the shareholders, the dividends, are they justified? What are the shareholders doing here? The English system is unique in the world. Despite much study and publicity, no other country has adopted this model in the last 28 years. Even where water is privatized, this typically takes the form of a fixed-term concession rather than the complete transfer of ownership as has happened in the English model. The great majority of countries provide water and sewerage services through municipalities or regional public authorities, as was the case in the UK before privatization in 1989. Even in the USA, 85% of water is public, carried out by municipalities. There has been a strong trend in Europe and elsewhere in the last decade to remunicipalization of private water services, including the cities of Paris and Berlin. Such systems are subject to scrutiny by local people in a way the private companies of England simply are not. Right, so on street, maybe another time. I'm way too tired and nearing the end of my tether with this, but yeah, maybe another time. Okay, so we know this. Local public municipalities are quite common in the sense in other countries, sorry, compared to the UK. There is considerable evidence to show that the efficiency of public systems is at least as high as that of private operators. Okay, so right, okay, so that's just a link to another paper. Oh, what have I done? There we go. Is it possible that these companies are driving up debt and paying out the dividends with an intention to have the government reassume control? Well, or not necessarily reassume control, because that surely they would want to continue to make money, right? And if the government reassume control, they wouldn't make as much money. But perhaps thinking they might be bailed out if things go wrong. Debt financing is cheaper because the interest rate on debt is basically always lower than equity's expected return. Shareholders aren't doing anything. They own the company, so they're demanding dividends. As long as the balance sheet is decently healthy, dividends can be sustainably paid out. Right, but okay, so but what if that money was put into making? What if the dividends were put into making to improving the company? Right, that's the question that we're asking here. Oh, this is not the cost of a living crisis, it's the cost of living crisis. Got it? I don't think I'm having a living crisis. A midlife, what would I be? I'd be at a third life crisis if I had one. Debt finance equals efficient plus risky. Equity finance equals inefficient plus safe. Right, yeah, okay. Thank you, Fellwolf. Sorry, I'm catching up on chat. They're not using the bigger tape. Current equity holders don't really care for new equity being issued. Right, but that's like, you know, I don't know, when I like I don't people they may not care for it, right? But like if it's good for the service or the good, I'm not sure what you call water, some combination of the two. Should we necessarily put their interests first? Right, that's primary. That's the question. That is the question we're asking. Should shareholders' interests come first here, rather than assuming their interests and then saying this is what they want? Not that that's not a helpful thing to think about. This is what I was trying to, I'm trying to get into the mindset, not the mindset of a shareholder, but trying to get the counter arguments and what would be the justification for privatization. Okay, let's carry on reading. Let's get, because they're gonna make a calculation here that I think is important. England could follow these global trends and restructure the service as a local democratic publicly owned system. The primary benefit would be to stop the extraction of dividends to shareholders and to reduce interest payments on debt. The combined savings of £2.3 billion per year equate to around £100 per year per household, equivalent to a cut in water bills of about 25%. Okay, well that is substantial, right? I mean, it's not gonna, yeah, we're going sector by sector. It's not gonna solve the cost of living crisis on its own. What are the losses? What are the costs of following that course of action? Maybe I should continue reading. Under public ownership, these savings can be used in a number of ways, with the choices subject to open public debate: reducing charges, financing investment, reducing debt, cross-subsidizing other public services such as social care. Okay, so let me say, no, let me carry on. Let me carry on. I need to stop pausing here. We'll never finish this paper. A new public system could be based on the following elements. New public bodies could be created for each of the water regions to take over the system and operate water and sewerage services using the existing workforce. The ownership of these bodies and responsibility for water and sewerage services should be vested in the local authorities in the region. The boards of the new bodies should thus have a majority of representatives from municipalities in the region, but also include representatives from local communities and employees, plus national government appointees. Board meetings should be held monthly in public, and all documents of the authority should be open to public scrutiny. We can all have fun reading through the 100-page reports that these authorities produce. Public ownership and openness should become requirements for any future provider of water and sewerage services. The functions of Ofwat should be brought back under democratic political control by returning them to the ministry or an agency directly accountable to the minister, thus ending the present system whereby the regulator acts autonomously without political accountability. The national agency will be responsible for both price regulation and for the standards required of water authorities, currently derived from EU legislation. The national agency will be required to hold regular public consultation exercises in formulating its policies and include representatives of the regional bodies, consumers, employees, and others. The new regional water authorities will be required to form an association to conduct annual public peer review of operations and efficiency, following the Netherlands model of sunshine regulation, a system which is at least as effective as and much cheaper than Ofwat. Sunshine regulation. That sounds interesting. Search Google for sunshine regulation. Transparency and disclosure in government regulation and business. I don't think sunshine laws are the same thing as sunshine regulation. Okay. Yeah, it's about kind of making things public and displaying them. Maybe. Such a system would provide a huge gain in democratic control over a vital service. Decisions would be made in public based on discussion of public interest and subject to transparent availability of information, but it would also have substantial economic benefits for consumers and government. The new public water utilities would acquire all the shareholder equity of the existing water companies. In the short term, this means that the extraction of dividends from end users to shareholders would cease. In the longer term, the existing private debt would be refinanced by public sector bonds at lower interest rates, thereby lowering the cost for the utilities. You're welcome, Donald. Thank you for coming along. Legislation to make these changes requires bringing the water companies into public ownership, which in turn raises the question of compensation. UK law confirmed as recently as 2012 that the rules of compensation for such transfers to public ownership are not determined by stock market prices, but decided by Parliament based on the public interest after taking into account various factors. Market value is only one factor in the valuation process. Okay, so the compensation. So compensation, we don't really care about. Okay, that's literally it. So that's just about how much they would be compensated by, which I'm not. I'm more interested in the functioning of this and the alternative. So it does seem to me that the current privatized system is paying out substantial money to shareholders, and the gains to the service have not been obvious compared to public ownership. Now, it's difficult because one thing that I've learned when I look into this is that, you know, it's easy to have a go at Thatcher, and you know, we all can do, and we will, and I already have on this stream, you know, for various things like selling them off at really cheap, and you know, creating privatized systems that were suboptimal to say the least. But it is often the case that when you look into the nationalized industries before privatization, they did often have quite a few problems as well. You know, like people were really unhappy with them. So I'm just wondering, again, like this is the type of graph where I want to know, what was investment like before? Which system's working better? Are they both terrible? I mean, that doesn't mean that we can't think about improving it. And this list of proposals is kind of speaking my language in the sense that it's localized. It has, you know, it's very transparent, and I think it would be accountable and democratic in a way that the, you know, the centralized nationalized industries maybe weren't. But yeah. So, because the revenues, Econoboy, because the revenues would be used to invest, right, in the service. So that's the main idea. So lower debt, but also the revenue would be used to invest. So that's primarily what I want to see, is more long-term investment in, well, it could be used to reduce prices, I suppose. Although obviously there's a dynamic problem there. But like the investment, I do feel that investment in a lot of UK utilities and transportation has not been sufficient to modernize them and make them robust and resilient, right? And also to reduce costs, right, in the long term. So yeah, I mean, concretely, sorry if you're asking, like concretely, yeah, like more, yeah, like better pipelines, and like, you know, more efficient factories, and yeah. Jesus. Okay. So it seems to me from reading this in summary. So let's replace this with this. It seems to me that there is a decent case that water bills specifically follow the narrative of, you know, shareholders making a lot of money, not doing an awful lot for the services, and that's driven an increase in costs for companies, for households. Sorry. So we can put that in here. That's wrong. This needs to be tidied up a bit. But basically, I've just got, yeah. So let's have privatization. So do privatization. Oh, privatization, rising profits and executive pay account for countrywide increases in the cost of living. Water sector. let's say, we'll say green. We should say directly. Do they directly account? And the trains, I don't think they do. So red. There you go. There's the key that we've just made up. More so Calameron I. But more investment isn't necessarily better. Pre-1980s UK electricity invested a lot, but privatisation nevertheless reduced costs and improved the environment by making the industry politically independent of coal miners, accelerating the transition to gas turbines. Yeah, okay, so investment, yeah, you can get white elephant projects, right? Certainly investment, yeah, isn't necessarily better. Hello, Ferrigan. You're welcome. Thank you for watching. Right. Okay. I think. So you guys, I mean, you guys see how complicated this is, right? Though, you know, this is one of the things we're not going to be able to do everything on this list. I think we're going to do one more. I'm going to look at this energy company's report as well, because we've done water, so we may as well do gas and electric, right? But you guys see how complicated this is, because it's like, what we're asking is, why are the current industries structured the way they are? And what is driving the higher costs for households, the higher prices? Is there uninvestment or malinvestment? It's not complicated, just make the UK a US state. I'm gonna demod you and then ban you. So yeah, and is all of this is it all enough to account for the higher cost of living? All of these ill-gotten profits. I think it's a tricky debate, you know. I don't think it always has a straightforward answer to say that it's privatization is, well, we're kind of on privatization now, but like, you know, that's what's driving the costs, and it's rich executives and so on. I'm trying to. Why is this website putting all the text to one side? That's not You're not a mod on YouTube? Oh, thought you were. To be fair, I probably got enough mods on YouTube, so I won't. Oh yeah, I tried to mod you and it just wouldn't let me. That was really weird. Utility co-ops. No, that is worthwhile to explore. Actually, let's put alternatives down. Co-ops, nationalisation, local, regional. How did it know I was going to say that? That's a very clever word. For once. Private. Now private's a bit glib, really, because there's private. There's private-public partnerships. Privatized but tightly regulated. But tightly regulated. So there's all these things to think about, aren't there? Yeah. All right. Are investors in control or managers? Investors want to extract rents, but the strength of their oversight is often questionable. Managers can be interested in other things like empire building. Yeah. It's absolutely true. So sometimes, I mean, it's sometimes wrong to think of them as aligned, right? Or maybe it's always wrong to think of them as aligned, like shareholders and managers, just because they both make more money than the average worker, perhaps, and they're both higher up and kind of in control in one way or another. But yeah, like the manager doesn't necessarily do what shareholders want, and it could be that there's conflict between them, and it could be that the managers are the ones that are being irresponsible. Absolutely, and if you know if you have very diluted share ownership, then it can be difficult for shareholders to agree and vote on things and control the company, right? Go away, Fernando. Managers are picked by investors, yeah, but they may not have all the information about what the managers are doing. They may find it difficult to exert control because there's so many different investors that they find it difficult to come to an agreement, and so the manager can kind of take the piss, right? Yeah, so okay, let's read this. This is the last piece of research we're doing, and then I have to go and make pasta for my housemate. Debates concerning the UK energy crisis have so far focused on what policy changes are required with respect to major energy suppliers and integrated oil and gas companies. Very little attention has been given to another group of important players in the energy system, the major electricity distribution network operators and the gas distribution networks at the heart of the UK's energy sectors. Okay, these goddamn DNOs and GDNs, we're going to get them. The DNOs and the GDNs play a vital role in controlling the distribution of gas and electricity from the national grid to end consumers of energy, the households and businesses. Right. The sector is a natural monopoly, meaning that there are severe limits on the amount of competition that can be introduced to lower prices to consumers. Yeah, exactly, right? So it's like you're insulated from competition, therefore you don't have to improve the quality of the service as a more competitive service would do. As a natural monopoly, the DNOs and GDNs are regulated by the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets, Ofgem, which sets prices and is supposed to act in the interests of consumers and work towards environmental improvement and improved energy security. Ofgem, Ofwat, Ofcom. Which came first, The Handmaid's Tale or these regulatory agencies? Because I want to know which one was inspired by the other. Okay. This briefing examines the financial performance and ownership structures of these often overlooked companies. It finds that the GDNs and DNOs enjoy the highest profit margins of any sector in the UK. Alongside extreme profit margins, the briefing also finds concentrated market structures. In the case of both gas and electricity distribution, just a small collection of companies have more than 90% market shares. The research further shows that the DNOs and GDNs are part of a global network of wealth extraction in which income generated from UK households' gas bills is channeled through to an assortment of tax havens, sovereign wealth funds, foreign pension funds, and some of the world's wealthiest individuals. These network companies pay out eye-watering sums to their owners. The dividend payments of the major DNOs totaled £3.6 billion from 2017 to 2021. And for the GDNs, they amounted to £2.4 billion over the same period. The analysis further identifies a less discussed channel for wealth extraction: interest payments on intercompany borrowing. These payments on debt owed to shareholders, parent companies and affiliates in the ownership network, like dividends, serve to enrich ultimate owners, even though the routes taken by interest payments to equity holders can sometimes be more circuitous. The interest payments on the internal debt of the major GDNs amounted to £928 million from 2017 to 2021, and totaled £842 million for the DNOs over the same period. Meanwhile, the effective rates of the DNOs and GDNs are significantly the effective tax rates, of the DNOs and GDNs are significantly lower than for the average company in the FTSE 100. Okay. They're owed to shareholders. So they're saying that they borrow across different companies. And the interest payments made, while they seem like a cost maybe to a specific company, to an individual company, they actually go through to the same people, and it's all some kind of like Ponzi scheme. That's what I'm reading from that anyway. So I don't know. We'll see more, I guess. In the context of the energy crisis and the wider cost of living crisis, the briefing argues that the DNOs and the GDNs should be subjected to much greater public scrutiny. Given their extremely high profit margins and extractive business models, these companies must be front and center in any conversations about windfall taxes and plans to bring the energy system back into public ownership. The analysis suggests that Ofgem has prioritized the financial returns of these companies over the financial security of British households strained by the rising costs of living. The gas and electricity distribution system in the UK is broken. It is high time for it to be overhauled. So is this a stream looking at potential sources for a possible future video I just popped in? It's not geared towards a future video as such. I just thought this was something that was worth researching, and I guess I wasn't planning on making a video about it anytime soon. But I don't know, it just seemed to be fun to do it as a stream, like, because I'm learning, like, I'm trying to find out what's going on. But anyway, hello, Matt. According to Wolf, all we need is worker democracy. Yeah, I don't think worker democracy is going to solve this problem. I mean, it would rein in shareholders paying themselves a lot of money. It would help with that, but on its own, I don't think it's going to create like a better energy sector. Debates concerning the UK energy crisis have so far focused on what policy changes. Wait, is this just the same? Yes. Okay, that's the executive summary, right. So, to remind ourselves, electricity distribution network operators and gas distribution network operators. So, the what's truly remarkable about the neglect of the gas distribution network. There's a typo there. Don't confuse me like that, report. Gas network distributions and distribution network operators from debates about the energy crisis is the fact that they are by far the most profitable sectors in the UK. As Table 1 shows, electricity distribution is at the top of the list with eye-watering operating profit margins of 42.5%. Gas distribution is a close second in the table with profit margins of 40.5%. Not even the private equity firms and major tech companies come close to reaching such levels of profitability. Okay. I mean, that on its own is, yeah, that seems like evidence that these sectors are too concentrated, right? And they have monopoly power. Wouldn't the worker shareholders be equally incentivized to pay themselves the dividends? Yeah, I mean, that's one of my issues. But I think, yeah, potentially. That's one of the reasons I don't think the worker democracy would necessarily solve these types of problems. But on the other hand, a lot of worker co-ops are quite well financed. So, I mean, I don't know if there's something about kind of the wisdom of crowds, or, you know, the we're all in this together kind of mentality of worker democracy. And I guess the appreciation that a shareholder can bail out, right? A shareholder has an outside option, whereas a worker doesn't have an outside option as easily. They're quite attached to an individual firm, so they may be more incentivized to vote according to the long-term interest of the firm as well. And that would mean investment as opposed to a shareholder who can just, ultimately sell up if they want to. But yeah, worker democracy isn't the only thing that we need for a better utility sector. Hello, Socky. Yeah, well put, JDM Gaming. I think that's true. Where is Yuri? Didn't know he was so into crypto. Did he? I haven't watched his stream. Is Yuri into crypto? I didn't. Oh, okay. I'm not really, but I don't know. Anyway, so we're gonna go through this. We're gonna assimilate. We're going to synthesize. The extremely high profit margins enjoyed by the distribution operators should not come as much of a surprise when we consider that their business models and the regulatory structure that supports them. Starting with the GDNs, Cadent Gas controls distribution to around 11 million UK households and businesses in the east of England, London, North West England and the West Midlands. Scotia Gas Network controls the distribution of gas to 1.8 million customers in Scotland, covering 75% of Scottish households, as well as almost 4 million customers in South East and Southern England, representing 90% of households in the region overall. Wales and West Utilities catchment area, Wales and South West England, includes an estimated 2.5 million customers. Finally, Northern Gas Networks controls delivery to 2.7 million households and businesses in an area extending from Scotland's border to South Yorkshire. Okay, so these distribution networks are very big. Now notice that these aren't the retailers, right? This is further down. This is downstream. So this is what I was talking about because I mentioned Bulb earlier, right? Bye, Super Toby Productions. Have a good one. Thanks for coming along. Make this less boring, please. There is literally no way I'm going to do that or can do that. This is literally like, it's called cost of living research stream. Like, yeah, I can play some explosions. Hi, Cosmic. I hope you're having a good day too. So anyway, I mentioned Bulb. The UK gas and electric, it's gas and electric, sorry, gas and electric retailer that consumers deal with that went into administration recently, and there was a price cap on gas and electric introduced by the government. And my thought was, well, okay, maybe those price caps aren't such a good idea because clearly the company isn't making so much money that they can afford to reduce prices without put on a funny hat, without it can't sorry, what the hell was I talking about? Oh yeah, without going into administration, right? So clearly it's not making that much money. That was my issue. But then it seems to me that actually funny hat PNG. Am I going to be able to do this? Let's see if I can put a funny hat on my thing. Image. But it seems that it's actually not that image. That's a different image to the one I wanted. I'm not going to be right back. Take it away. Take the image away. Wait. Where is this thing? All right. Image 4. Oh, fuck it. I can't forget it. I can't even. Nothing's working. I'm getting distracted. So, but it seems that it's actually the distribution centers that are the true monopolies that are making a lot of money and ripping off. They're ripping off consumers, but they will also be overcharging the retail gas companies. So this is another thing with like us leftists, right? When we direct anger, I mean, you can't expect members of the public to sift through this stuff, right? As somebody just said, it's very boring, but it's important. And it's important that we, I think, direct our critique towards the right parts of the network and the right companies, right? It's not enough just to say, oh, all the gas and electric companies, they're making all the money, they're ripping everybody off. It's not at the retail end, it seems to be at the distribution end. And that's a great thing to know, right? That's a great thing to know. Okay. The NOs are also organized in regional monopolies, blah, blah, blah. Okay, they've got lots of, they're regional monopolies. They account for 94% of revenues and 94% of revenues in electricity and in gas, as shown in Table 2. Yeah, so there's four gas companies and 5 electricity companies that... Oh, wait, is it 5? Sorry, yeah. Can I count? Am I able to count? Is that a thing that I can do? It's actually 6. 4 gas companies and 6 electricity companies. Can these reports work on their fucking formatting? Yeah, so that they account for the overwhelming majority of the sector. The other firms either operate in Northern Ireland or are fringe players in Britain, typically providing last mile connections to businesses and new housing developments. Given that tens of millions of households are captive to regional monopoly distributors of electricity and gas, one key part of Ofgem's remit is to ensure that these companies do not abuse their monopoly power by charging prices that are too high. Ofgem pursues this goal through setting price controls according to a formula that is designed to balance 2 goals. On the one hand, creating sufficient incentives for private investment. Right, okay, so this is the argument for higher prices, right? Yeah. If it incentivizes private investment. Because people expect more money in the future when they invest. Yeah, so creating incentives for private investment in the UK's distribution infrastructure, on the other hand, safeguarding households and businesses' electricity and gas bills. It is clear that such a balance has not been achieved, okay? Seems to be true. In its most recent State of the Market report published in 2019, Ofgem itself admitted that the overall costs of the transmission and distribution networks to consumers have turned out to be higher than they needed to be, and that the majority of network companies are achieving profit margins towards the higher end of our expectations for each sector. Okay, so that's independent regulatory agency speak for we've completely fucked this and we're sorry. The last 7 years of experience offer ample reason to believe that customers are indeed paying too much for gas and electricity bills, and that this in part arises from the unduly advantageous regulatory conditions in which the GDNs and DNOs are operating. In fact, I thought that was spam. Remy, try not to spam look like your spam. I was like, that looked like another hot girls and boys thing. Criticism has to be tactical and specific, prioritizing more impactful issues with a degree of specificity that highlights the actual issues and implies a solution leads to better outcomes. Yes, exactly. Instead of just blind rage and everything's, everything's ripping us off and all the companies are bad. That's what the tabloids do. And then the next day they demonize someone else. So yeah. The last 7 years of experience, the customers offer ample reason to believe that customers are indeed paying too much for gas and electricity bills, and this in part arises from the unduly advantageous regulatory conditions in which GDN and DNOs are operating. In fact, since Ofgem made its admission in 2019, conditions continue to be highly congenial for the major distribution operators, while average gas and electricity prices have increased markedly. Figure 1 shows the price dynamics from December 2015 to December 2021 for prepayment tariffs. These prepayment tariffs cover 4.3 million users in the UK, about 15% of overall customers. Importantly, prepayment customers are more likely to be in vulnerable circumstances and experience fuel poverty. Yeah. As we can see in this figure, while prices have both waxed and waned during this period, the general trend is upward, with the cost of the average prepayment dual fuel bill rising from £1,163.44 in December 2015 to £1,241.44 in March 2019 to £1,307.09 in December 2021. A 12% rise in nominal costs over the entire period. Okay, what is it now as well? That's what I want to know. That will have gone up even more. Prepayment tariffs. So they're just when you pay in advance a set amount. They spelled tariff wrong. Yeah, look, honestly, so many of these reports have so many typos. I'm such a stickler for that kind of thing as well. So yeah, let's close it. End of the stream. This is the weirdest Elden Ring stream ever. Why is that funny? It's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just hysterical after reading too many reports about monopoly power and price tariffs. All right, we are... okay. How much of households' energy bills actually go to covering the costs of gas and electricity distribution? Yes, that's the question we need to be asking. Is it cost-driven or is it not? In 2021, Ofgem reported that the average British customer was set to pay £214.35 for gas and electricity distribution, which around the time accounted for roughly 1/5 of a standard energy bill for a typical household. This, of course, is a significant outlay for most British customers, especially those experiencing fuel poverty, and it is an outlay that would be much smaller if it were not for the huge operating profit margins enjoyed by the major GDNs and DNOs. Okay, so their profit margins are like 40%, right? So if you reduce that, if you think of that as like 140%, and you reduce that by 40 percentage points, then you've got like, I don't know, 150 or something like that. So it is. Again, it's a piece of the puzzle, isn't it? And it is an outlay that would be much smaller if it, sorry. Figures 2 and 3 show how these profit margins have changed over the past 2 decades in comparison to the average firm in the FTSE 100. And they also present profit margin estimates offered in October and November 2021 by IBIS World for the major GDNs and DNOs this year. All right. The gas distribution network's operating profit margin. Average... Wait, what? That's increased so much recently, though. FTSE 100. So the FTSE 100 profit margin. See, this is interesting, right? This is a good figure. Let's look at figure 2 more. So we've got the average gas distribution network's profit margins for these different dates from 2007 to 2011 and then through to 2022, which is, I think, a little bit more of an uncertain estimate. And then you've got the FTSE 100 as this grey square. Now look at that. They're hovering around 10% of profits, right? Now that is interesting because look how much higher the profits are for the gas distribution networks than for the average. Now these are oligopolies, right? These are oligopolies. There's much less competition, and I think you can see that in contrasting the profit rates. Now that you could say there's perhaps other reasons for the higher profit rates. Is there more risk? I don't think there is that much risk in these. These are needs, right? People, in terms of consumption, you can pretty much guarantee consumption. Let me solo these graphs. Did something happen at that time? Well, that was after the 2008 financial crisis, mute. So, yeah. And it is well known that inequality, I think, has increased Natural gas price surge. Yep, that as well. That as well. They started making more money. Have they been reinvesting it? Have wages within the industry gone up? Okay, now the same thing for the... Yeah, again. So this is for electricity, right? So you can see again. Although these have just been high for much longer. These have just been high for much longer. Okay. I reckon I reckon you're right, BT. It's the natural gas price surge here. Because you don't see... You see a slight rise. 5 percentage points. Nothing to be sniffed at, but... Yeah, you don't see... Look at that. That's just jumped with gas prices. Have I looked into why people on renewable energy only tariffs have also seen a rise in energy prices? No, that's an interesting point of comparison though, isn't it? Because that would suggest that it's industry structure rather than the cost-based, right? Or Scottish Hydro. One second, what's on? Oh no, look at them. Well, they were doing all right at first, but then things are actually... Oh wait, did they go bust? Look at that decline. And then disappears? But they're not even in 2022. Wait. They haven't disappeared, have they? Was. Oh, it merged with Southern Electric on December 1998. So why is it in this report then? Scottish Hydroelectric. Wait, what? So are they using SSE? Do they mean Scottish and Southern Energy? Or is that a separate one? So Scottish Hydroelectric apparently disappeared in 1998, but it's on here. I mean, that's the type of... I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but... See, this is... Whoever asked for it to make it more interesting, look at this. We've got a disappearing hydroelectric company. That is super exciting. So why have they... Okay, so that seems... I don't know. That seems like they've done something wrong. They messed up their labels or something. It's not that important. It's not that important. I am really tempted to change this into just to like what happened to Scottish Hydroelectric screen, but we won't. So, as Figure 2 shows, the major GDNs have enjoyed a dramatic increase in their operating profit margins over the last 15 years, with average profit margins rising from 15.2% in 2007 to 11, when they were just 4.5 percentage points higher than the FTSE 100 average of 10.7% at the time, to 42.6% in 2017 to 2021, putting their profit margins no less than 32.1 percentage points higher than the FTSE 100 average of around 10.5% at the same period. The same dramatic uptrend in operating profit margins is not in evidence with respect to the DNOs, the electricity ones, for which we have an even larger range of data. What is instead notable is that these margins have remained extraordinarily high for such a sustained period, with the average among the major DNOs increasing from 44.1% in 2002 to 2006 to new heights in excess of 50% between 2007 and 2016, and then settling to 49.2% from 2017 to 2021. Astonishingly, what this means is that over the past 5 years, their average profit margins have been almost 5 times greater than the FTSE 100 average around the same period. And what is even more astounding is that their average profit margin is, according to IBISWorld, set to once again surpass the 50% mark this year. Yeah. So, okay, so what I want to know... So this is the major ownership. is to what extent this translates into higher prices and a worse service, right? The absolute incompetence of these reports is so incredibly hilarious. Yeah, yeah, it really pisses me off actually. I mean, think tanks. Oh no, man. I don't know. I don't know what to do. Think tanks just like they can be so rubbish, can't they? Have a nice day. See you later, New. Thanks for coming along. Anthem of Dying. I wonder how Ukraine has affected this. Yeah, that was one thing that we haven't really gone into. I mean, we were saying it won't be instant, right? It will filter through, and I think it's not. Yeah, the invasion of Ukraine. I'm not sure it's a factor right now, but it will be more like no think tanks. I'm sorry to anyone who works in a think tank, right? Who happens to be watching, and not all think tanks. Hashtag not all think tanks, but honestly, they cobble together some of these reports sometimes, you know. And this is why, right? This is why I don't just quote these things. You know, it'd be so easy for me to be like, oh well, this think tank found that actually the water companies are charging water companies' profits are costing UK households £100 a year. It's so easy to quote that. But then when you look at the report and it's just like things are mislabeled and it's absolutely riddled with typos, and then they like, you know, they get a figure wrong or something like that, you're just like, oh my God, like, you know. So it actually happens that water report was pretty good, I thought, but it was just an example. Yeah. That's all they're getting paid for, to make those reports. Yeah, I mean, it is literally like, get a job. Yeah, like, it's careerist, isn't it? The think tank world. It is careerist. That's the thing. It's just like something that young progressives can do to, you know, have good careers and status and get paid pretty good salaries and, you know, mingle with the elite. I'd love to write shite reports with zero accountability. I don't know about you. Yeah. Oh God. Think tanks really frustrate me. The vast majority of them are just ideological mouthpieces. Yeah, exactly, Robert. And you know, oh, sorry, not Robert. Wait, who said that? Newer, sorry. My chat jumped around. No, like, it does frustrate me, and it frustrates me even more when they're left-wing think tanks, because I'm like, what do we believe? It's like built on sand. The things you hear people say on the news, like the percentages they bring out, the figures they bring out, and you look into it and you're just like, this is shit. This is based on shit. Literally shit. Because when it's free market think tanks, which are also really, really bad, by the way, you're like, okay, well, that's fine. Like, I want them to be crap. But yeah. Margaret Thatcher really effed things up, didn't she? There is a link between Thatcher and think tanks, actually. Might be one of her worst crimes. I don't know too much about it, but like, I know that she kind of, I know that she that world proliferated when she was in office. Right, okay. What is the wider significance of the enormous profits made by the distribution operators? For some, the profitability of these companies may not be a huge problem per se, so long as the ultimate beneficiaries of these profits, the shareholders, include the general public. We have seen this line of reasoning play out recently in relation to other energy firms. Okay, so you're saying if shareholders are just people, you know, then it goes to the shareholders of the world. But I think shareholder ownership is too concentrated for that argument to work. But anyway, according to the argument, the fact that BP and Shell have recorded soaring profits is no reason to implement a windfall tax because it will harm the pension funds that benefit from the dividends paid out by these companies. Okay, pension funds, slightly more persuasive argument in my opinion. But again, shareholder ownership is very concentrated. I'm not sure it's that persuasive. Lots of think tanks also have an access journalism problem. Access to polls means you're tempering a lot of your opinions. Yeah, exactly. The argument that energy firms should be treated with kid gloves by policymakers because their profits ultimately find their way in the hands of British pensioners via dividends to pension funds has already been shown in a previous Commonwealth report in collaboration with the TUC and the High Pay Centre to be vastly overstated. The proportion of UK listed shares owned by UK pension funds declined from 32.4% in 1990 to 2.4% in 2018. And those with Jesus. UK listed shares owned by UK 2.4%. Wow. Okay. And those with private pension investments are disproportionately in the highest income bracket. Relatedly, UK equities are only an estimated 8% of UK pension fund asset allocation. The findings in figures 4 and 5 challenge this narrative even further. Right, so this is Cayman Islands, right? Yeah, so it all goes to tax havens, I think, is what we're seeing here. These figures, which figures? Figures 4 and 5. I always have a go at my students for that. These figures show all shareholders with at least 10% of equity in the major DNOs and GDNs. Looking at figure 4, all 4 of the major GDNs are privately held by consortia comprising multinational conglomerates, sovereign wealth funds, and Canadian and Australian pension funds and investment managers. Only one financial institution is registered in the UK, Hermes Investment Management, but this is part of Federated Hermes Inc., a US-listed investment manager. The figure of Li Ka-shing, the richest person in Hong Kong and the 43rd richest individual in the world, also looms large in the ownership network. In fact, via his stakes in Cayman Island and Bermuda-registered holding companies, he is the ultimate owner of 12.3% of Northern Gas Networks Ltd. And an astounding 36.4% of Wales and West Utilities. Right. I'm not as interested in this, but we've almost finished this section anyway. Like, it's bad, but it's not... Is it driving the cost of living? This isn't like which rich bastards are benefiting from, UK privatization stream, although it kind of has covered that a bit. It's a what's driving the cost of living stream. Elijah, yes, this will be it will be posted on the live channel. Don't you worry. To what extent is that decline just a figure of risk diversification and an increase in domestic exchange? I would link it, but you can look up the asset mix of the UK's pension fund. Yeah, I mean, that would be potentially related to those two things, but I think the argument that they're refuting, perhaps indirectly, is the one that says we're taking away from pension funds by reducing profits, right? That's what they're trying to refute. And I think just the raw percentage is actually sufficient to make that argument. Hello, Remy. And yeah, we missed you. We missed you so much. SSE stands out. Okay, let's skip this bit. Right. This is what I'm interested in. Rather than serving ordinary pensioners, we can see that the DNOs and GDNs are part of a global network of wealth extraction in which income generated from UK households' gas bills is channeled into an assortment of foreign entities and wealthy individuals. But what is the magnitude of the wealth extraction? In other words, just how much of the distribution operator super profits are transferred to shareholders via dividends and other channels? No. Actually, that's not. Sorry, that's not. I thought it was the next. Wait, so I'm not... But what? So they're just looking at how much money people are making. I don't think they've got... The purpose of this brief, I don't think they've got information on how that translates into households' cost of living. The purpose of this briefing is to cast a much-needed spotlight on the gas and electricity distribution operators. The hope is that the analysis and findings will stimulate discussion on how the extraordinary profit making of these widely overlooked firms should be addressed by policymakers in the context of the huge financial strains that low and middle income households are under due to rising gas and electricity bills. If politicians are concerned about the fiscal consequences of alleviating the cost of living crisis, then a windfall tax on the DNOs and GDNs is sensible, given their outsized profit margins and their below-average ETRs. Thus far, most of the debate about the windfall tax has focused on the oil producers operating in the North Sea, but the findings here suggest that this discussion needs to be widened to other important players in the UK energy system. Okay, but do we want a windfall tax? Do we want a windfall tax, or do we want a better energy system that where profits are lower and prices are lower? Right? Like that. I don't know if this report's actually asking that question, he says after reading through the whole thing, rather than figuring that out sooner. More broadly, the findings in this briefing indicate that the UK gas and electricity distribution is broken and and should be taken back into public ownership. One of the main advantages of the publicly owned distribution system is that it can put an end to the wealth extraction at the heart of the privatised system overseen by Ofgem. A publicly owned network of gas and electricity distribution would not be beholden to shareholder pressures for outsized returns and would therefore be in a much better position to deliver a cleaner, more affordable and more democratic energy system. Okay, so this is again, this is another one of the things that annoys me, right? It's like all of this stuff, like, yeah, I agree, right? You know, offshoring in the Cayman Islands, really high profit margins, which I can't see as being, you know, justified. Clearly in a non-competitive industry, rising prices for consumers. I think all of those things are bad. To then say all of that and be like, oh, well, therefore public ownership in the final paragraph. How many sentences is that? 3. I mean, have they got another report here, to be fair to them? This is a... Okay. I mean, it's a petition. There's some detail on this proposal. Who is this? We own it. That's a different... What I'm trying to say is they've not really made an argument for public ownership, right? And this is the thing. When you had a nationalised system which did have its problems, and I don't think people on the left accept that enough, right? Nationalisation, certainly the model the UK used, was extremely centralised, and it wasn't very efficient. It wasn't very democratic. It didn't empower consumers and workers and citizens. And so just to say, oh, well, all this, therefore public ownership, it's not good enough. So the effective tax rate, so they're not paying very much tax. That, you know, again, yeah, fine. But then they're suggesting they suggest a windfall tax. I guess that's like a one-off by saying like, oh, well, you're taking all this money, therefore a one-off tax, like you're making a lot of money, therefore we'll take some of it back. But would it not be better? I mean, you could feasibly do a windfall tax and distribute it to consumers, right? And that would like be effectively using the money to reduce prices. But why not use the money to create a better energy system? Yeah, I don't know. Good information in this report, I think, assuming that it's correct, because we know that they had Scottish Hydroelectric as existing after it had disappeared, according to Wikipedia. But, you know, maybe that's just a minor error. Hopefully it is. But yeah, I'm not getting, first, the extent to which these higher profit margins directly lead to an increase in cost for consumers. I'm not getting, second, a sense in which these monopolies are actually like poorly run, right? And third, I'm not getting why bringing back into public ownership would solve these problems. So what are people saying? Yeah, so what were the problems before privatization? Well, there were a few problems. They were run based on a very centralized structure, which actually was not particularly attentive to the needs of consumers or workers. And there are a lot of strikes in the nationalized industries, right? So it's not like the state running it automatically helps the workers. And there are a lot of consumer complaints. I mean, they're legendary, the how bad they were for consumers, these nationalized industries. It's really well known. It's difficult to get like hard data from that period because it was before we started doing like loads and loads of polls all the time and things like that. So there's that. They weren't really that democratic, and they weren't necessarily particularly well run. That's more argument for doing nationalization correctly, not so much an argument. Wait. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, no, yeah, sorry. Homo sapiens, let me read that out. That's more argument for doing nationalizing correctly, not so much as an argument against the concept of nationalization as a whole. Oh yeah, I agree completely. But I just think sometimes it's like, well, let's go back to nationalization, right? And I want to see what the proposal is. I want to see more about the proposal than a paragraph at the end. I mean, okay, we could. This is, a new state-owned renewable energy company back into public ownership. Bring the privatized. But yeah, it's not. It's just saying, oh, we just save all this money and then we'd use it to do this. But I mean, they're not thinking about things dynamically. Are we looking for a cause and effect relationship between profits and cost of living? Yeah, exactly, BT. That's one thing that I'm curious about. Is there? Because I feel like sometimes that's the narrative. And I think we may have found one in the water sector. I think the gas and electric sectors raise suspicion, certainly, but look. And I think the train sector, no, I don't see it in the train sector. Oh, we've already got this. So, no, wait. So this one's yellow. This is my... It looks weird on dark mode yellow, doesn't it? Lighter yellow? Let's go with lighter yellow, come on. That's even worse. Wait, was that darker? Oh, I don't care. Okay. Energy sector, yeah. So, distribution companies have very high profit margins and are funneling money to offshore accounts and foreign companies, individuals. But whether this has a major impact on household bills is unclear. That is my summary, right? Did you not have to make dinner for your housemate? Yeah, I do. Yeah, he's being very patient. Go away, Best Cam. Why is Best Cam's always on here? I swear I don't see it on other people's streams. Yeah, all the huge profit margins can be thought of as extra prices that consumers paid, right? Yes, but there's two questions, right? One, what is the magnitude? Because sometimes when you work it out, you're like, oh well, actually, it would reduce prices by a bit if you got rid of the profits, but it wouldn't actually be that much. And second, the question is whether are the profit margins justified on the basis, on a dynamic basis, right? In the sense that they encourage like investment. And I'm not saying I think those things are true. I'm saying I want to see some discussion of it. What problems were solved by privatization? I do think that there were some efficiency gains in terms of how the organizations were run. But, you know, I don't think privatization was the right solution necessarily. Certainly not the way that the UK did it, where they just basically sold it off for not very much money, and a lot of the managers of the companies, of the nationalized companies who made a lot of money and had a lot of power before, went on to be the managers of the privatized company and made even more money. You know, it was a terrible episode. Nobody's saying it was good. I'm just saying I want better arguments for nationalization. Pitchfork Economics. Yeah, a few people have recommended that. I don't listen to that many podcasts, like not loads. But, right. Sorry, the chat's not in the way. Worker co-ops. Yeah, I think so. The Luigi, in this report, the water report, they had some quite cool proposals for like regional. So this bit. So I'll try and make this available at some point. I'll tidy it up a little bit. So yeah, like this kind of list of bullet points of how to have regional water companies, controlled by the local government, as opposed to just saying, oh, nationalization, right? That's what I want. Oh, right, okay, Hobo, I get you. Geez, I'm really catching up on chat. Oh my god. Are you an anarchist? Kind of. At heart, in spirit. Anarchism of the spirit. Market socialism of the intellect? No, that just doesn't sound... That sounded better in my head. Doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I do think... But I think worker democracy is most appropriate for, like, a lot of businesses, Trev Ken. I just don't know that it would solve the problems of, like, investment and the structure of these of these utilities. Anarchism in the sheets, market socialism in the streets, or something like that. What I find sort of unfortunate is the conflation of all forms of nationalism. As soon as a woke skull sees that word, their brain turns off. Same as how some people respond to Darwin. Yeah, and also the conflation of forms of privatization, right? I think there are some very interesting detailed debates to be had about the exact structure we need. I don't use a reference manager. I do. CLE8CT. Right, I need to go and have dinner too. Right, I'm closing all this crap. We've had enough. The cost of living. What have we learned? Shall I summarize? Why am I on oh yeah, we went on a spreadsheet at one point. The UK should privatize its military. Yeah, no, that's the conclusion, Econo Boy. So in conclusion, if we privatize our military, then good things will come. No, so what we've been trying to figure out is whether we think that just executives making lots of money, shareholders making lots of money, high profit margins could be reduced, all of that could be reduced in order to noticeably benefit UK households by lowering the prices of water, energy, transport. And the answer is, in the water sector, it seems that that's probably true. In the energy sector, it could be true, but we're not sure, because the report that we read didn't do enough to convince us. And in the train sector, it's actually not true, right? And none of that is privatization is good. That's not what we're arguing. What we're trying to say is when as leftists we talk about the cost of living crisis, should we be saying that, you know, it's just caused by high profit margins and things like that, and the profits should effectively go back to consumers and that would solve the problem? Or is it a little bit more complicated than that? And I would say it's a little bit more complicated than that. Whether or not privatized utilities are the correct system. Because I don't think they are as a rule, certainly not in their current form. But overall, the system is at fault in a lot of these sectors, especially trains, I think. Yeah. Okay. Let's call it everyone. Thanks for coming along. We had over 500 at one point. Me just like reading spreadsheets. So I'm slightly surprised. I'm not that surprised by it. Because quite a lot of you have been tuning into the stream. So thank you very much for that. But we've had enough. We might continue it one day. We didn't look at housing, we didn't look at care, we didn't quite engage with the arguments about private firms investing and whether that justifies their profits enough. And I think there are some readings that we might look at. Anyway, I'll tidy up that document and put it online and stuff.